Monogatari series by Nisio Izan, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. You want to know how I was feeling about going to school back around the beginning of April, when I had just met Tsubasa Hanekawa, and we'd just been put in the same class? You want to know what I was feeling on the way to school as I trod that path? Well, I wasn't feeling much of anything at all. My feelings as I traveled that road, even the road itself, didn't seem concrete to me. I couldn't find any concrete reason for going to school. Get woken up by my little sisters, change into my school uniform, get on my bike, head to the out-of-my-league private prep school now at Suhai. I'd been busy repeating that routine, that homework-like routine of busy work, for 2 years already, but I'd never once considered what that repetition meant, or didn't mean. Or no, maybe I should say that I'd given up considering the question ages ago, because no matter how hard I thought about it, I was never going to find an answer. But the same could be said of almost all the young men and women who have the honor of calling themselves high school students in this great nation of Japan. Or I expect it could, so I wasn't actually the least bit special in that regard. The truth of the matter is that virtually all the young men and women who, despite having completed their compulsory education, continue to live the life of the high school student, who at least superficially attend school of their own volition, can't even discern an abstract meaning in doing so, let alone a concrete one. So it's perfectly understandable that the extremely small number of well-grounded students who do find a sense of fulfillment in their schooling would be left scratching their heads, dumbfounded by the fact that an outsider like me, who must seem to them like some kind of monstrous apparition, would still come to school every day. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm dissatisfied. When these sorts of thoughts pop into my head, I do find it the tiniest bit disquieting. But no, I'm not dissatisfied. It's not like there's anything else I'd rather be doing, or even anything else I could be doing. I'm nothing, but precisely because I'm nothing. The fact that I'm a high school student, high school itself, provides me with the assurance that I'm me. Particularly, because over the spring break before the first term of my senior year, I went through hell. I saw into the depths of a hell that could very well have made me forget I was a mere high school student, and put an end to my school career altogether. It was a spring break that made me unpleasantly aware of the verity, the venerability, of banal aphorisms like ordinary is happy, and nothing beats an uneventful life, and that assurance should have been a real lifesaver for me. Nevertheless, as I rode along the road that April, I thought about how strange it was that I still blithely went to school as if bound by some hard and fast rule, as if it was normal, and then after class, I went home again, the same way. It's funny. Having been through that kind of hell, you'd think I'd feel truly grateful for an ordinary life, that I would live each day as if it were my last, but the me that had returned from hell was still just regular old me. They say danger past and God forgotten, but I guess you forget hell too, once it's past. I asked Hanekawa about it once. Asked her if the fact that I couldn't bring myself to feel grateful for the grace of everyday life meant that I was made of stone. And this is what she said. What she told me, her face lit up by a wonderfully reassuring smile that, as always, made me wonder if she really did know everything.
Of course you can't, Araragi, because everyday life is something we take for granted. How can you take to heart something you take for granted? There's a road, and you walk down it, that's all. Take it from me.
What? A rock?
Yup, a rock.
Do you mean the kind you find by the side of the road, or more like a precious stone?
Come on, I obviously don't mean a precious stone.
Sure, maybe it was obvious to her, but I had yet to learn what it was all about, so how was I supposed to know what was obvious and what wasn't? The only thing that was obvious to me was that I had no idea what was going on. But I wasn't about to let it stay that way. I have a low tolerance for confusion. I decided to try and piece together what was going on, piece by piece, step by step from the beginning. Starting at the beginning is the basic principle of organization. It was the 11th of April, after school let out, no one else was in the classroom, and Hanekawa and I were having a meeting about the class get-together planned for the following week. The reason we were the ones holding it was that she was the class president, and I the vice president. You might expect the leader of each clique or their representatives to show their faces, but like clockwork, they all seemed to have found some other important business from which they simply couldn't tear themselves away. Well, it may not have been an out-and-out lie that they had other things to do, but there was no question that the poor turnout was exacerbated by their faith in the fact that everything will basically turn out fine if we just leave it all up to Hanekawa, which made her brilliance seem like something of a sin, and a grave sin at that. Her brilliance, unhindered even by a burden, as great as myself, unconsciously spoiled everyone around her, though I wasn't exactly upset about having a chance to be alone with Hanekawa. Not that I had some kind of ulterior motive, it's just that since now Itsuhai is a prep school, Pretty much all the third years were studying for their college entrance exams. Everyone was on edge. The mood was extremely volatile, like, is this any time to be throwing a party? So it was a particularly uncomfortable atmosphere for a washout, like myself. In other words, it's less that I was happy to be alone with her, and more that I was happy not to be around all those other anxious students. Needless to say, since Hanakawa could have aced the entrance exam for any institution of higher learning anywhere in the world, even if it were held the following day, she didn't share her classmates' bristling anxiety. And also, needless to say, given my total lack of inclination to prepare for exams, not to mention the fact that I wasn't even sure I was going to graduate, neither did I. So, in that sense, you could say that the two people participating in that meeting were the two best candidates for the honor. Given my general lack of enthusiasm for such things, though if I'd had anything else important to do, I might very well have gone home too. Unfortunately, however, I was free. Terminally free. And sitting across from Hanakawa seemed slightly more likely to prolong my life than going home to fight with my sisters. Anyway, during that meeting, or once it was basically wrapped up, really while we were chatting about one thing and another, Hanakawa brought it up.
A rock?
Okay, a rock. What about it? A rock. Or was she saying a rock? Was she implying that I didn't know enough about international relations or something? We hadn't really been talking about anything that would flow naturally into a critique of my knowledge base. Our meeting had been perfectly genial up to that point.
A rock, or yeah.
It was rare, odd, for her to be so vague, or rather, it seemed as if she couldn't decide how to describe it. She was unsure. Not unsure of her judgment. We weren't yet at the stage to define it, or able to refer to it, so she just wasn't making a decision. Which is why she vaguely said, a rock. That was how it seemed to me, anyway.
I guess if I had to call it something, then a stone statue?
A stone statue?
Though it isn't really a statue.
That's why I said, if I had to meh. Giggled Hanakawa. It was really cute. But in terms of a command, it was a laugh to misdirect. I would have been perfectly willing to go along with her misdirection, but my interest in this rock or stone statue won out. Come on, Hanakawa, what's the deal?
Oh, forget about it. I shouldn't ask other people about something I don't understand myself.
Wise words. A little too wise. That's exactly what you should ask other people about, that's the whole point. Doesn't she know the saying to ask is a moment's shame, not to ask a lifetime's? Okay, I doubt I know any sayings Hanakawa doesn't.
But, well, I was thinking wasn't collecting this kind of story Mr. Ashino's line of work?
This kind of story?
Urban legends, the word on the street, secondhand gossip, in which case I thought you might also be interested in the 7 wonders of the school.
7 wonders, huh?
No, there aren't really 7 wonders, of course. But listen, isn't a school like a treasury of ghost stories? It was built over a cemetery, or it was hit with an air raid during the war. That kind of bee.
Wait, does Naoitsu High have that much history?
No, but...
But what? I mean, I don't know the pedigree of our school either, and upon reflection it might be risky not to know the origins of your own school. Going every day to a place you don't really understand without really understanding your feelings about going there, as if it were the most natural thing in the world? That's a little bit too little understanding. Shh, seems like the disgrace I bring to the school might be wonder number 1. Saw.
That doesn't sound cool at all.
And no, it didn't make me happy that she did. Maybe she hadn't gotten the joke, but her serious bent didn't mean that she didn't have a sense of humor, in which case I guess it just wasn't funny. Forget about not being happy, it was kind of a shock. Besides, would any guy on earth be happy to hear a girl say he wasn't cool?
I wouldn't go so far as to call it disgrace. And anyway, putting it at number 1 seems weird.
Drop it already. She was being more like a guidance counselor than a straight man. Her position that everything in need of correction should be thoroughly corrected was indeed laudable. But I didn't particularly welcome being on the receiving end of it. Didn't particularly welcome, or particularly unwelcomed, or just felt restless. You might even say hopeless.
The buildings themselves seem relatively new, so I don't think the school's been around since before the war or anything.
Was there a pamphlet or something that touted the year the school was founded? Seems like there would be, but if I ever saw one I don't remember. I would have just ignored a number like that anyway.
There was another educational institution here before, but it's been Naoitsu High School for 18 years. It turns 18 this year. About the same age as us. About the same age as us?
Wow, I would have expected it to be younger, I was going to say, but if it was the same age as me and Hanekawa, I guess it wasn't all that old. But that's Hanekawa for you. Unlike me, she had a firm handle on the history, the origins of her school. I bet when she was in her last year of middle school and studying for the entrance exams, she looked into it because she wanted to know what kind of high school she'd be attending. Then again, maybe she'd found out about it long before that, just a piece of common knowledge she'd picked up along the way. In either case, no one likes that kind of middle schooler.
Huh? What? Expected it to be?
Nothing. It's just such a half-assed number.
Maybe, but you're right. I guess this school doesn't have quite enough history for there to be 7 wonders there. Don't seem to be any stories about students who died here or anything.
Don't seem to be. That's. Well, I wondered, something like a death. Not the kind of info you'd look for while you were studying for the entrance exam, let alone just a piece of common knowledge. It wasn't anything you'd find out unless you really dug deep into the 18 years of the school's history.
In other words, how can I put this? Naoetsu High doesn't have anything like a real ghost story?
Yeah, I suppose I've never really heard one. Then again, I was always decisively disconnected from the student circles in which such rumors circulated. Partially because I was never interested in knowing any of the hot gossip about who was dating who, or who was getting into fights with who. It wasn't my intention to be the standard bearer for some revolution against our information overload society. But it's true that I never wanted to play the town gossip or the town crier. That much is certainly true. I've wanted to live in isolation from anything that could be called news. At the same time, I idolize Hanekawa for knowing everything, so my attitude towards life is vaguely, vague. What were we talking about? Sorry, Hanekawa. My mind's been wandering a little too far, and I lost the thread.
Come on, Araragi! I told you, it's this stone.
This stone that I have no clue about. Please, just start at the beginning.
Aren't I?
Well, sure. I bet she thought so. She thought she was explaining it clearly, from the beginning, and in fact it might have been perfectly clear to a good listener. Unfortunately, I was the listener, and it was all Greek to me. You've got to adjust your conversation to the level of your interlocutor, as in crank it all the way down for me. At the bare minimum, I wanted her to clarify whether we were talking about a stone or a ghost story.
I guess it's a ghost story about a stone, yeah.
A ghost story about Estonia? It wasn't a ghost story about Estonia, or Iraq for that matter. If it were, then instead of being roundabout or giving me the runaround, she'd have gotten to the point right away. A ghost story about a stone, yes. But telling me it was a ghost story about a stone, being told that it was a ghost story about a stone, didn't advance the conversation. I remained, as ever, baffled. However, after we had finished locking up the room and I had trailed Hanekawa out into the quad, we made some progress. I say progress, but things only progressed in my own head, nothing actually moved. The situation itself stood immobile, like a rock. Since Hanekawa hadn't made her intentions clear to me, as I trailed after her I had to wonder if she was taking me to the garbage area on the other side of the quad, but our destination was in fact a flower bed. I'm starting to get the picture, but it's not really a rock or a stone statue, is it? I saw why her description had been so ambiguous in the quad's flower bed, maintained by God knows who. A flower bed that mystified me was the thing. A rock. A stone statue, if she had to call it something, but only because I'd pressed her, because she had to call it something, and it didn't resemble a statue at all. It just sat there. It was in and of itself nothing but a rock. But whether you had to or were pressed to, calling it a stone statue was not entirely without basis. Because it was ensconced in a small shrine, ensconced it was, surrounded by dutiful offerings to boot. No, dutiful might be a bit of an exaggeration. The arrangement of the offerings and the shrine's construction were both anything but, a better word might be haphazard, or even crude. It didn't seem like any sort of proper procedure had been followed, or rather, the whole thing seemed like some kid's art project, like the product of playing house. One kick is all it'd take to smash this shrine to pieces.
Where do you even get ideas like that, Araragi? Kicking a shrine, you'd be punished.
Well, she was right. Since spring break my ideas were tinged with a touch more violence than before, and possible divine retribution aside, the shrine just looked to be some wooden boards held together with a few nails, so one kick probably would leave it in pieces, but the rock enshrined in it was another story. A story where I'd probably break my foot. It definitely wasn't big enough to be called a boulder, but nor was it small enough that you could just kick it out of the way. I don't walk around with a tape measure in my pocket, so I couldn't say precisely, but I'd estimate it was about the size of a rugby ball, an uneven rugby ball and a somewhat dirty one, at that. Judging from its size, I gauged that it would be too heavy for Hanakawa, as a girl, to lift, but I didn't think that I as a boy could lift it either, so best not to rush into anything. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of Hanakawa, a vain high school boy. That's me. Hanakawa, is that the rock you were talking about?
Yup, that's it.
With that confirmation, the conversation came to a grinding halt. But then, what was the appropriate question to ask to keep things going? Were you the one who left these offerings here?
As if I never bring sweets to school.
Thought not. Our conversation had gotten derailed. We seemed to be in sync but weren't. But, well, whether she'd actually bring such things to school or not, the cheap sweets on the wooden altar, which was rustic, or obviously handmade like the shrine itself, hardly reflected her sensibilities. I imagine she eats slightly classier snacks. And since she goes about life with a drive that must burn through a lot of blood sugar, I doubt she dislikes sweets altogether.
At first, actually, well, you know how Mr. Ashino really looked out for us over spring break? I was wondering if there was some way to repay him.
Repay him? Wait, it was just me, not us, that Oshino looked out for over spring break. Plus he demanded a fee, 5 million yen total. It didn't add up for her to worry about some way to repay him, but she was a girl who didn't add up when it came to stuff like that. When you get right down to it, I ought to be thinking about repaying Hanakawa herself. And I definitely had been, which is why I'd agreed to take on the ill-fitting mantle of class vice president, and meekly followed her to the quad at this particular moment. That said, was there anything someone like me could do that could benefit her in the first place? The thought left me feeling hollow. Unaware, however, that I was thinking such thoughts or well aware of it, for all I know, Hanakawa continued her explanation.
Dash and Mr. Ashino collects tales of aberrations, right? That's his real occupation. Or his job, right?
His job? Does that guy even work? Now that you mention it, I do remember him saying something about collecting tales of aberrations, but wouldn't that be more of a hobby? I doubted he had a goal in mind, like putting together a book of them or giving a presentation at an academic conference. The guy just lived one day to the next. He didn't even have a permanent address. Collecting tales of aberrations can't possibly be lucrative. He's not exactly stimulating the economy.
Working isn't about money, Araragi.
Heady stuff. What kind of high schooler was she? At the same time, maybe only a high schooler could go and say that. But this was Hanakawa, and I suspected she'd go on saying it even after joining the workforce.
Getting back on topic, hop! The point is, if there were anything like 7 Wonders or a school ghost story at Naoitsu High, we could tell Mr. Oshino about it. As a thank you.
Would it serve? As a thank you? I'm not trying to throw cold water on the thought itself, but the aberrations Oshino collects, aren't they more like the real deal? Vampires, for instance.
A school ghost story can be the real deal. And in terms of name recognition, school ghost stories are among the elite of the aberration world. There may not be all that many people who are familiar with the cackling woman, but everyone knows Toilet Hanako, don't they?
Well, sure, if getting talked about is the barometer of aberrationhood, then name recognition would be important. It's a cultural paradox, isn't it? Becoming too well-known can make something seem cheap or vulgar. It's a far cry from so-called sophistication, anyway. It's by achieving widespread popular recognition that they become urban legends and secondhand gossip. Maybe it's just a matter of degree. Like you know it when you see it, or there's no point in trading rumors once everyone knows about something.
But I don't think Mr. Oshino cares about sophistication. Rumors are a kind of popular culture, after all.
Maybe so, but I wonder. I know it's the thought that counts, but wouldn't Oshino just snort at a school ghost story?
Mr. Oshino isn't that kind of person.
To me, he was precisely that kind of person, but apparently she felt differently. No, that's not what I mean. Listen, Hanakawa. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not sure Oshino is looking for something so well known, with as much name recognition as a school ghost story. If it's such common knowledge, maybe he already knows about it.
I wonder. He might, of course, but every school has its own variations on a school ghost story. Plus, once you're an adult, it's harder to waltz into a school. As far as tales of aberrations go, a school ghost story might be a difficult type for Mr. Oshino to get his hands on.
Difficult. Ah. Sure, as a student I take going to school for granted, so it took me a minute to see what she meant. But yeah, a school might be a closed space, the hardest place there is to get into if you're a stranger. And moreover, an adult. Particularly an adult like Ashino, lacking anything resembling a steady job or a fixed abode. A guy like him might get nabbed the second he set foot on school grounds. So if he wanted to take stock of any tales floating around the school, he'd have to interview the students individually, which would seem just as shady. Since he wasn't with some TV show, even if he made a formal request, he'd probably just get the door slammed in his face. I'm back on board, so you decided to investigate a school ghost story, with an eye to teaching him about it.
That sounds so presumptuous, I would gift it to him. Maybe you're right, Araragi. Maybe he wouldn't need it. Still, don't we want to do everything we can?
No, I'm not that proactive about life. Forget about doing everything you can. The guiding principle of my life is to do as little as possible.
Be that as it may, it's like I said. I looked into it, but now Atsuhai doesn't have the history, and nothing like a ghost story has coalesced yet. Well, a swing and a miss, I thought.
She sounded perfectly natural, slipping the words a swing and a miss into conversation. Tsubasa, want to do everything we can. Hanekawa must have swung and missed more times in her life than I could guess, but that hadn't broken her spirit, and she kept on swinging and missing, as well as hitting the odd home run, which I thought made her a real iconoclast. Oshino had put it so well. What was it he'd said?
But there was one thing that bothered me, or somehow that I wanted to bother about.
You mean this rock? Or stone statue? Or whatever? I asked, glancing at the thing again. It still looked like an ordinary rock, and yet, with the little shrine over it and the offerings surrounding it, the stone did seem like it might be graced with wondrous spiritual power. Like a stone statue carved into that particular shape. Ah, and speaking of wondrous spiritual power, I'm not at all knowledgeable about this stuff, so maybe I'm speaking out of turn here. Aren't there stories about stones that turn into protective amulets for their owners, power stones or something? Though talking about power stones and power spots takes things in a bit of a different direction from tales of aberrations.
Yup, that's what I mean.
So, while you were looking into all sorts of stuff, you came upon a mysterious rock way out in this quad's flower bed, but you can't for the life of you figure out what's up with it, something like that. I tried to get everything I'd learned thus far straight in my mind. Organization isn't exactly my forte, but I don't do well with a chaotic mess, so I have a bad habit of wanting to sum everything up as simply as possible as soon as possible. Though I'm well aware that it's not the best way to arrive at the truth, Hanekawa's ability to process information, on the other hand, was on a different order of magnitude or was measured with entirely different units, so apparently she could cope with this level of chaos as if it were perfectly well ordered.
That's not it.
She unceremoniously but gently deflected my summary. I had to wonder if her room was actually a total disaster. Well, not just hers. Geniuses' rooms are always messy in the collective imagination. A biased assumption, either way.
In fact, I already knew this rock was here.
You really do know everything.
I don't know everything, I just know what I know, but it didn't used to be like this.
What didn't?
When I was a first year right after I started here, in other words, I did a general survey of the school.
Why the hell would you wick?
Well, I wanted to see where I'd be spending the next 3 years of my life, I guess. Out of curiosity.
Curiosity. You're the curiosity here. A model student's behavior was rife with mysteries. Her prodigious eccentricity went far beyond thoroughly researching Naoetsu High before taking its exam, which admittedly was just a figment of my imagination. This was no time to be nattering on about such things, though. So, 2 years ago, when you surveyed or explored the school, this flower bed didn't have any rock?
I never said that. Listen, okay? I'm saying it was here. I almost tripped over it, so I remember it clearly.
Tripped? Seriously? You trip over things too?
What do you take me for, Araragi?
Hanekawa looked fed up, no attempt to hide it. The fact is that she hated being treated like a model student or a superwoman.
Yes, even I almost trip over things sometimes.
I'm surprised to hear that. True, she tripped over a rock named Araragi and stumbled into something horrible over spring break, so maybe she wasn't so perfect after all. Let us note, however, that she said almost tripped, meaning she didn't actually. But if it was here, what's the problem?
That's what I'm trying to tell you. It didn't used to be like this. The rock was here, but the shrine wasn't. Nor the offerings, nor the altar they're sitting on.
In other words, someone, continued Hanakawa.
Someone in the past 2 years dolled up this rock like an icon enshrining it.
That night, I headed to a certain abandoned building. The ruins of a cram school that had gone out of business a few years back. It had taken up the entire building, so it must have been a sizable enough cram school, but unable to stand up to the furious onslaught of a major exam prep chain that had moved in over by the station, it was forced to retreat, or to abscond under cover of darkness. You hear all kinds of stories, but who knows what really happened? Well, in that sense, I was heading from a high school whose origins I didn't really have a handle on to an abandoned building, whose origins I didn't really have a handle on. Even I'm a little shocked that I could tread such a vague path without any sense of danger whatsoever. But, not being Tsubasa Hanakawa, I didn't want to know about any of it badly enough to do my homework.
Hey Araragi, I've been waiting for you.
Ashino, Mimashino, expert greeted me with the same mock innocent line as always. When I arrived at a certain classroom on the 4th floor, there was a little blonde girl in the corner, but I'll omit a description of her. I informed Ashino of the situation. I may have added a few dramatic flourishes.
A stone, huh? Stones often become objects of worship, don't they? The power stones you mentioned are somewhat different, but you can lump them in.
Huh. Like precious stones taking on magical properties?
Maybe, though, these days, in modern society, it tends to be their value and not their appearance that fascinates people.
Ashino chuckled softly. He always came off as totally flippant, which is honestly not a type I do well with. But Mimoshino wasn't just a flippant old fart. He was an old fart who had saved my life, my dignity, and my humanity. Flippant though he most definitely was.
You said it was about the size of a rugby ball, right, Araragi? So, which way was this rugby ball enshrined?
Which way?
Vertically? Horizontally? You said it was like a rugby ball, so assuming it has a width and a height?
Oh! A pretty detailed question, I thought, but on the flip side I'd come in Hanakawa's stead to give a detailed explanation, so it was really an oversight on my part. Maybe it would have been best if Hanakawa herself had come, but since it wasn't a crisis or an emergency, my conscience had prevailed against the idea of marching the youthful maiden around town in the middle of the night. It's kind of like a Jizo statue, and when you include the shrine, maybe it actually is patterned after one. Let's see. Was Jizo a Buddhist deity?
This Araragi kid really knows his stuff.
You don't have to say it like that. Not so naturally, anyway. Though it was just a random fact I happened to have picked up, and the first and last I could muster on the subject. I wasn't even sure what Jizo was the Buddhist deity of. Let me see. The patron saint of travelers? No, wait, isn't there something about the 6 Jizos? But bamboo hat Jizo. The more I spoke, the more I seemed to be giving myself away.
Ha! Well, in Japan, Jizo certainly has come to be conflated with the roadside gods that watch over travelers, though it'd be odd for it to be in a flower bed.
For once, Ashino almost seemed to be giving me the benefit of the doubt and didn't make fun of me as I flailed helplessly.
A stone statue. Since you described it as a stone statue, I'm assuming it's got that sort of a shape, meaning it's not just round, but carved into the shape of a person.
I don't know. Honestly, Hanakawa had already given me that impression, so I guess I sort of saw it that way. But if I just happened to see it as I passed by the flower bed, without any preconceptions, I probably would have thought it was just some nondescript rock.
Aha.
Or, maybe not even if I hadn't been told about it, just passing by and seeing it ensconced in that wooden shrine, with that altar and everything, I might have thought it was carved like a statue.
The simulacrum phenomenon.
Huh?
When people see something that resembles a face, they find a face in it, or a human form in a stain or dirt on the wall. As the old saying goes, the truth behind the ghost is withered grass.
The truth behind the ghost, so I guess aberrations, and tales of aberrations, have something to do with this semi-whatever too.
No, that's a separate issue entirely. Not to mention Araragi, even if the stone took the form of a statue, that doesn't mean someone carved it. It could have been naturally worn down by the elements until it ended up looking that way.
The elements, huh?
Would that be it? According to your story, 2 years ago your beloved friend saw the stone just lying around. Has its shape changed at all?
She said it hasn't. Ordinarily, even if you almost tripped over it, no ordinary person would remember a rock, or the shape of one from 2 years ago. But in that regard, Tsubasa Hanekawa is no ordinary person. She'd told me that, though the last couple of years had weathered the stone somewhat, it had that same rugby ball shape. In other words, even if someone had enshrined it during those 2 years, the main body, the stone itself, had remained unaltered.
And what's Missy Class President's take on it?
Her take. Well, Ashino always calls Hanekawa Missy Class President. You'd think that since she hates being treated like a model student, she wouldn't be thrilled about that nickname either, but for some reason, maybe because it's Ashino, she doesn't particularly seem to mind. Incidentally, the one time I tried calling her Missy Class President as a joke, she really went ballistic on me. I wasn't sure I would ever recover. Hanekawa saw it when it wasn't enshrined, so at the time she seems to have thought it was just a rock. But now she's researching our campus as a way to repay you, Ashino, as to how something's happened to the rock she stumbled across 2 years ago. She found it really unsettling or something.
Unsettling. Sure, it must be unsettling when what used to be just a rock is sitting in some shrine. Though I can't begin to guess, if Missy Class President actually finds anything unsettling.
This is no laughing matter. Maybe the way Hanekawa talked about it made it seem that way. But I don't know, some mysterious faith springing up on campus was thoroughly unsettling, and even if it weren't, we couldn't just let it go. Even someone with as little school spirit as me felt that way.
Well then, Araragi, seems like the first thing to do would be to investigate the origin of the sweets. But we're talking about Missy Class President here. Maybe she did that before she even talked to you.
Acting like he saw through it all, that was Oshino. For some reason it grated on me, this was Hanekawa was pretending to get. It was a strange feeling. As if you know so much about someone you just met, yet I myself had gotten to know her only a few days before him. When you got right down to it, I didn't know a damn thing about her. Yeah, from the brand and time of purchase, calculated backward, from the sell-by date, she nailed down which shops they could have been bought in and the students most likely to buy them.
A regular Sherlock Holmes. Did she make enquiries?
No, not yet, apparently.
Maybe she felt like that would be rushing things?
No. She figured out that whoever left the offerings wasn't acting alone. An unspecified number of people seemingly left the sweets and whatever else at the shrine, in which case she needed to widen the scope of her investigation and couldn't continue operating under the veil of secrecy. Which is why I'm here. You'd be interested in a story like this. She says it's her way of repaying you for looking out for us. Judging that I'd more or less said what I needed to say, that was how I wrapped up my explanation. Well, it was unclear if it was wrapped up. But in any case, it emphasized that I was there not to consult Oshino about a mysterious stone, but simply to do him the favor of delivering info about strange doings at our school. If I didn't make that clear up front, my debts might balloon even further. True, since I already had no way of paying off the 5 million yen I currently owed him, maybe it didn't matter if I accrued more. I've heard that once the amount you owe grows beyond a certain point, you start not to mind, not being able to pay it off, or taking on even more debt, and not necessarily because you've gone to pieces. I felt like I was standing on the edge of that precipice, which meant I really couldn't afford to get any more bills. Since I couldn't risk incurring one of Ashino's consultation fees, on this occasion I had no choice but to act slightly, or flagrantly, like I was doing him a favor.
Ha.
Ashino let out a forced laugh, as though my ulterior motive was obvious to him. Hanekawa had mentioned the cackling woman to me, and I bet the monster had the same sort of laugh. Well, what? So something like a school ghost story holds no interest for an expert, huh? You prefer something a little more difficult based on archival evidence or whatever.
No, Missy Class President was right on that score. Even jack of all trades like myself has his strengths and weaknesses. It can be a hassle to get a hold of stories from inside a closed space. Like a school, I'm grateful for the offer.
Oh, of course.
Nevertheless, Araragi, this is a favor from Missy Class President, not from you, so it by no means cancels your debt. I eagerly await your consideration in that regard.
Well, at least I didn't incur any new debts. I guess that was all I could ask for. I can't deny I'd had my hopes up, but this seemed like a good compromise.
I'm not sure it qualifies as a tale of an aberration, but it's a good story. Gotta be sure and write this one down.
Ashino. Just for my edification, I'd love to know what you ultimately plan to do with all these tales you've been collecting. Are you planning to put them in a book, or present them at a conference, or anything like that? There was no particular need for me to ask him about it right then, but I'd been wondering about it while I was talking with Hanekawa after school, and I'd wanted to ask him if I had the chance. At least to that extent, I was intrigued. In other words, Was this man, my savior so to speak, actually amassing aberrations as part of his occupation, or was he just insisting on calling his hobby work when he was actually unemployed?
I'm not some sort of authority on aberrationology, so I don't have such lofty goals. I do sell the stories I collect to interested parties, though.
Sell? And you get customers, they're just ghost stories.
Says the guy who almost played the lead role in one.
Just curious, how much do you get for one?
Haha. I don't know about divulging my negotiated prices to a supplier.
If that was how he felt about it, what could I do but drop the subject? But charging me a fee for dealing with an aberration, then turning around and selling the story to someone else, did strike me as a pretty sweet business. Is that what they call the middleman margin? I'm sure it's not as sweet as it seems to a neophyte, of course. But either way, simply finding out that Ashino derived an income from his fieldwork was enough for me. But, do you really think someone will buy this story?
Good question. I have one customer who will take anything and everything, but lately that one seems to have started behaving erratically again, and I get the feeling it'd be best to put a little distance between us. Not that I can go sell it to him instead.
Ashino seemed to be thinking about how to monetize this, which seemed a little premature, like he was counting his chickens before they'd hatched. A weird stone getting enshrined in a school flower bed wasn't going to interest anyone. It quite literally wouldn't be worth the paper it was written on. It'd take an expert to find an interesting way to spin it. So, what about it, Ashino?
HNA, what about what?
That's not fair, I asked you first. As an expert, what do you think? Running through all the pertinent points, I tried again. What was seemingly just a hunk of rock 2 years ago has 2 years later become an object of worship for some part of the student body for an unspecified number of people. It's become an aberration-y thing. Does that ever happen?
It's not uncommon for objects to become aberrations after all. Aberrations come into being according to some standard. And yet? It's hard to say if it's worshipped because it's an aberration, or if it became an aberration because it was worshipped.
Is it worshipped because it's an aberration, or is it an aberration because it's worshipped? I only intended to repeat Ashino's words back to him, verbatim, but apparently I'd gotten something wrong.
No. It's not, is it an aberration because it's worshipped? It's, is it worshipped because it's an aberration, or did it become an aberration because it was worshipped?
Sure, the wording and grammar might be a tiny bit different, but is it such an important difference that it's worth harping on?
In this case. But it's a little hard to know, just from hearing the story. Think you can draw me a picture of it, Araragi?
Huh?
You heard me. If you came here straight from school, you must at least have a notebook and something to write with.
I do, but I'd never imagined I'd be asked to draw at that point. I was taken aback, but if that was what he wanted, I guess that was what he would get. To be honest though, I'm not exactly artistically inclined, even if I seem like I would be.
They never taught you to draw in art class?
Now at Sousa Prep School, so they don't put a lot of emphasis on the arts. And I didn't take any art classes for my electives.
Well, just do your best.
Roger. I ran my mechanical pencil across the page of the notebook I'd taken out. I was relying on memory. If it was 2 years ago, I'd have to admit that I didn't remember, but it had only been a few hours. I might not be Hanakawa, but as a teenager and currently active high school student, my powers of recall could handle that much, at least. It's about like this.
Nope, that's not gonna cut it.
Dismissed out of hand. If I aspired to become an artist someday, that would have put an end to my dream. Can't you say something nice, even if it's not true? Don't note me, I tried my hardest to draw it the way it is. Maybe the lines seem a little wobbly, but that's how the thing looks in real life.
That's not what I meant. I need you to draw the shrine and altar, not just the stone itself.
Hun? But
Just do it.
urged to blindly forge ahead, I begrudgingly did as I was asked. Not like it was such a hassle to add in the shrine and altar. They weren't exactly the most complex structures. I've been calling it a shrine because I don't know how else to describe it, but it couldn't have been simpler. That is, if it hadn't been held together with some nails, it would have been just a pile of toy blocks.
Oh, that kind of shape? The shrine, I mean.
Yeah, but in terms of the altar, its shape seemed totally unremarkable. Like it was no more than a tiny desk to put offerings on. But the shrine's shape felt like it was based on something, if only clumsily. Scrutinizing the notebook, which I'd handed over to him, Ashino responded.
Yeah?
Was it at a temple? Or had I seen it around a Jizo statue or some roadside god, I don't know? but I feel like the shrine's shape rings a bell.
Hey, if you've got tidbits like that up your sleeve, you've got to tell me, front, was that supposed to be some hidden ball trick revealing your erudition?
Asked Ashino, smirking. Judging from his tone, he was mocking me rather than scolding me. No, it was a vague notion, and it only came to the forefront of my mind when I drew it out like this. In that sense, I only remembered thanks to your bright idea to have me draw it, I almost said before cutting myself off in a fluster. If I started throwing around words like thanks and bright idea, he could hit me up for money, not that I actually thought he was that much of a money-grubbing miser. I just felt wary, since the subject of money had come up. Anyway. But I can't specifically call anything to mind. It's more like I'd seen it somewhere, like it wasn't my first time ever. Can you tell, Ashino? If this shrine is modeled on some...
No, I can't say I recognize it, but...
After saying but, Oshino fell silent and handed the notebook back to me. I felt a certain sadness that the masterpiece I'd labored over had outlived its usefulness in a few short minutes. But we weren't critiquing my artistic skills. But what? Don't start saying something and clam up if you've got an inkling. Tell me already. I'd meant to press him on the point calmly and rationally, but frustrated that my masterwork had been so useless, that he'd been such a dick about it after forcing a bad artist to draw, I ended up sounding a little heated.
You're spirited today, Ari. Something good happened to you? While we're at it, I'd like to hear what you think about it. Boy, would I ever like to hear the erudite Mr. Araragi's opinion on the subject. What's your take on this particular matter?
What's my... Well, you said it yourself in passing. It might be a school ghost story, but I'm not so sure it's about an aberration.
Aha, meaning?
Well, this is a pretty boring, realistic interpretation, but I bet somebody I don't know who but somebody started worshipping some stone that had landed in the flower bed as if it were a god. I mean, a shrine doesn't just appear out of thin air. A person's got to build it?
A vampire, on the other hand, might be able to manifest one.
Ashino turned his eyes to the little blonde girl in the corner. True, there were exceptions. But that shrine was obviously a human creation. It seemed that way to me anyway, though I'm not 100% certain. So in this case, the somebody is plural. In other words, an unspecified number of students started a little religion, or a faith group kind of a thing, and took that stone as their object of worship. Something like that? I wasn't expressing myself well, and it was hard to put into words what the relevant questions were in this case. But the idea that a bizarre faith had sprung up at my school was definitely unsettling. Or flat out frightening.
People have freedom of religion, you know. It's guaranteed by law.
Right, no question about that. In this case, though, it's clear from Hanakawa's testimony that 2 short years ago this now deified stone was nothing but a lump of rock doesn't. That kind of give you... Unlike Naotsuhai, which had only been around for 18 years, not long enough to develop a school ghost story, this venerated stone had just been a rock sitting by the roadside up until a couple of years ago, and that was difficult for me to accept. I think that's what it was.
An aberration doesn't have to have a history or pedigree, though, since new aberrations are being born, being produced, all the time.
When something creeps you out, it's because some kind of malign influence might be involved. That's my hunch, and I believe that's what Hanako was worried about. In other words, someone's knocked together this sham religion, fabricated this object of worship, and is taking a bunch of students for a ride.
For a ride? To rip them off for some cheap candy?
Well, I don't know.
If someone was going to take them for a ride, you'd think they'd do a proper job of it. I haven't seen it for myself, Araragi, but as far as I can tell from your crude drawing, the construction of the shrine is itself quite crude, about as crude as the drawing.
Ashino, I'm well aware of how bad I am at drawing, but it hurts my feelings to hear someone else say it, okay? Don't make it sound like my crude drawing has made a crude shrine even cruder.
Anyone who's trying to take them for a ride would build a more impressive shrine, don't you think? In order to fool people, work on the design, or so says a friend of mine.
Like you have any friends?
You're right. Maybe not a friend.
I was trying to get back at him by hurting his feelings, but not only did I fail, Ashino even smiled in apparent delight. What the hell went on in his mind? It was a mystery.
Not to mention, in that guy's case, it might have been just another lie,
mused the expert.
Putting that aside, Araragi, how does it strike you?
Well, sure, I guess it makes perfect sense. If you were trying to take them for a ride, you wouldn't use such a childish shrine. If you can't build one yourself, you might outsource the construction. So then, is it a genuine religion? It's part of their creed that they have to build the shrine themselves, no matter how broke-ass it is. I know we have freedom of faith in this country, but all the same, founding a new religion at your school is kind of… And why would anyone want to worship a rock that was just sitting there like that? It would be one thing if it were some kind of precious stone. Then again, maybe it was some kind of insane power stone, and Hanako and I just couldn't pick up on it?
You'd sense something from a power stone, wouldn't you, in your present condition? Okay, listen, Araragi. This is the message I want you to relay to Missy Class President. Knowing her, it'll tell her everything she needs to know.
Forget about the school ghost story angle for the moment, the ever-smirking Ashino advised for some reason with an even jollier expression than usual.
Now try taking a look at the Naoitsu High curriculum. The lot of the student is to study after all.
The next morning, in homeroom, when I told the overly sagacious Tsubasa Hanekawa what the all-seeing expert Mimoshino had said, she paused a moment then went, as though it indeed told her everything she needed to know. What the hell was up with the both of them? It was scary. Since the village idiot over here naturally didn't understand any of it, I did my best to avoid voicing such rude sentiments and simply asked, "What's it all mean?"
Oh no, just that I was jumping at shadows this time around, man. I really let you and Mr. Oshino see an embarrassing side of myself. Not just a swing and a miss. A full-on strikeout.
That still doesn't tell me anything. An embarrassing side of yourself? Did I miss something? Come on, what do you mean?
Nothing, really. This might sound like bullshit, but I had my doubts all along. If people were going to worship something, they'd do a better job of it. Still, it was the very defectiveness of that half-assed object of worship and half-assed shrine that gave you the creeps and unsettled Mr. Oshino, and that's what was worrying me. I'm glad it was a false alarm.
Hanekawa, hang in there. I know you can find a way to explain it that even I can understand.
Hang in there?
Our class president's face twisted into a wry smile. Apparently, my wording had tickled her.
Listen, once all the evidence is neatly lined up, everything turns out to be totally fine. Up until now, you and I had both been focusing on the rock itself, right?
Huh? Oh, yeah. But what's there apart from the rock?
The shrine. Focus on the shrine.
The shrine?
Yes, the shrine. If we'd focused our attention on it instead, we never would have had to bother Mr. Oshino.
Bother my ass. All he did was sit in an abandoned building and listen to me talk. Focus our attention on the shrine. Where does that get us? That raggedy ass.
Okay, I'll put this as plainly as I can. I'm pretty sure the rock wasn't put in a shrine in order to be worshipped. It was chosen as a thing to put in the shrine.
How's that different?
It's totally different. A shrine is only ever the container and not the object of worship, so at least we can discount the possibility that there's some bizarre religion at the heart of all this.
Still sounds the same to me. If there's no religion involved, doesn't that mean somebody was trying to pass off some sham religion?
No, that was our false assumption, since that shrine wasn't originally built to be a shrine. About the Naoitsu High curriculum, I don't have to look at it again to understand because I checked it out before I took our exams.
So she'd done that after all? Gives me the willies.
Look, when we were first years, we had to pick an art elective. I took fine art, but they also offered calligraphy and technical arts, didn't they? Mr. Oshino was specifically nudging me to consider the curriculum for the technical arts class.
Technical arts?
Yep. Woodworking and stuff. And the curriculum for that class includes a freestyle shed construction project. Something along those lines. Anyway, I didn't actually take it, so I can't say for sure. But I can only assume that the shrine in question was a shed built for that class. And judging from the workmanship, I'd say it was a reject. This is just a theory. Mind you, but I think this is more or less how it went. Some student tried to build a shed for technical arts but botched it. Having built the thing in class, the student was instructed to take it home. It would just get thrown out once he or she got it home, though, so off the student went to the garbage area to surreptitiously get rid of it, and passed by the flower bed on the way.
True enough. There was a garbage area near the flower bed. A piece of junk that large wouldn't fit in the classroom trash can, so the logical course of action was to take it outside and put it straight into the garbage.
As our hypothetical student passed by, he or she laid eyes on the rock in question, or maybe tripped over it like I almost did. Either way, finding this appropriately sized rock, the student figured that even a botched job might look surprisingly good with a rock in it.
It wasn't that the rock looked like a stone statue because it was inside a shrine. It was that some scraps of wood looked like a shrine because there was a rock in it, like the simulacrum phenomenon, or not quite, but a reject. A botched job ceased to be a botched job. So it was the opposite, the reverse. I managed to get out in a trembling voice.
Yep, of course it isn't any less crude, but at least it went from being a botched job bound for the dump to looking like a shrine, a shed, so the student just took off and left it there. Thus a stone statue worthy of worship was born.
What about the altar and the offerings of candy?
I assume the altar got there in more or less the same way. I don't know if it was for class or a club or what, but some other student must have botched a project and figured it looked like an altar if it were left in front of the shrine. As for the candy, I imagined either the gardener or some students passing by the flower bed had some with them and left it there for no particular reason.
You mean they just kind of leave an offering because it seems like the thing to do, and not out of anything as overblown as faith?
An offering, or maybe they just left whatever candy they hadn't eaten during the day before going home. It was always a possibility. But if the stone isn't religious in origin, then that's the most likely scenario.
Right. Cheap candy, not even loose change, has a strong "I chucked what was left over" vibe. I don't know who's in charge of the flower bed, but wouldn't that person dispose of a shrine that suddenly showed up one day?
Nah, most people don't destroy something that looks like a shrine without a second thought. Why invite divine retribution?
Fair enough. And after a while, they start to take its existence for granted, I suppose. They don't ask where it came from. They take for granted the gratitude they feel for its grace.
Phew, I feel so much better.
Hanekawa stretched happily. For someone like her, not understanding something must be a source of stress, because she smiled as if she really did feel much better. I see. Something still doesn't sit right with me. Or rather, I've got some feelings about that conclusion.
Forget about it. It's all thanks to you, Araragi.
Huh? It is?
I mean, wouldn't you say Mr. Oshino was only able to figure it out because you told him the shrine rings a bell? Even he couldn't if he didn't base his judgment on the proper material, and how could he predict what the curriculum of a closed space like a school might contain? It's not because it was modeled on something that you recognized it, it's because you'd made something like it yourself for class. The art elective you took was technical arts, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, that would be it. I hadn't seen it at a temple or by the side of the road. I'd seen it in the school woodshop. When Oshino demanded that I draw a picture of it, probably it was just to learn the shrine's shape, but witnessing my reaction when I recalled as I drew, he hit upon the truth. That was how it had gone. That was how, but...
Okay, case closed, wait. Araragi, where are you going? Class is about to start. Hey, come on, don't run in the halls.
The epilogue, or maybe, the punchline of this story. Paying no heed to Hanekawa's injunction, I ran down the hallway and out of the building towards the quad, to the flower bed, and once there I picked up the shrine, housing the rock that resembled a stone statue, and smashed it on the ground. I mean, there was no point in smashing it at this point, but I couldn't help myself. I completely dismantled the shrine, reducing it to its constituent scraps of wood. Even if I hadn't, the second it no longer surrounded the rock, it was nothing more than that. In any case, I carried the scraps over to the garbage area. The completion of a trip begun 2 years earlier. Yes. Needless to say, I was the one who had built the shrine for woodworking 2 years earlier and left it in the flower bed more or less just as Hanekawa surmised, instead of bringing it home. The reason it rang a bell wasn't that I'd made something like it myself for class. I'd made it myself. I'd completely forgotten about it. Even if I couldn't remember things from 2 years back like Hanekawa could, this was pushing it. I'd said all kinds of horrible things about it, called it a crude, childish, raggedy-ass shrine, but it had been my own handiwork all along. Now I understood Oshino's detestable little smile. He must have been holding in a massive burst of laughter. Hanekawa might have shown us an embarrassing side, but it was nothing compared to me. Happily, Hanekawa, who probably assumed that no one could forget so completely something that happened only 2 short years ago, didn't seem to have caught on yet, but I was so ashamed that I didn't feel like I'd ever be able to look her in the eye again. That said, my attendance record was dangerously poor, and she had ordered me to turn over a new leaf, so if school was about to start, I had no choice but to return to the classroom. As I trudged away from the garbage area, I caught sight of the stone that up until recently had been ensconced in a shrine. Yup, now it just looked like a regular old rock. Nothing but a rock. Immobile. The offerings of candy were still there, but that alone wasn't enough to make it look like a stone statue or an object of worship. If someone cleaned up the cheap candy, no one would ever leave another offering there again. It made me feel a little guilty about having destroyed the shrine in the throes of my humiliation. Having built it myself, though, I knew better than anyone that absolutely no divine retribution would be forthcoming. Yet I still felt a little bad for that rock, thanks to my sheer laziness and shame at the thought of taking my failed creation home. It had been on a real roller coaster ride, now worshipped as a god, now reduced to a regular old rock. Apologizing to a rock is kind of weird, but I entered the flower bed and lifted the stone off the ground. Is it worshipped because it's an aberration, or did it become an aberration because it was worshipped? Oshino had asked. Undeniably, this rock had gone so far as to receive offerings, even if they were only cheap candy. Realizing how my unprincipled behavior might have turned it into an aberration made me feel even worse. A stone we took for granted became a statue whose grace we took to heart. It could have turned into a graceless aberration, its origins no longer relevant. Graceless or not, it would have come to be taken for granted. That day could have arrived. The thought struck me, and in turn, drove home another. Maybe I shouldn't be attending school without feeling much of anything. If the teacher wasn't there yet when I got back to the classroom, I'd ask Hanakawa, did my failure to be grateful for everyday life mean that I was like a stone, or that I was made of wood? Though if stone can become statue and wood a shrine, maybe it wasn't such a bad thing. Huh? What the... This rock. And that's when I noticed. It was the texture that did it, though I hadn't noticed 2 years earlier. No question about it, though, this texture, this feel. It's concrete? I don't mean to sound like a whiner, but in early May, in other words, around the beginning of Golden Week, when a strange fate bound me to Hitagi Senjokahara, I was both mentally and physically spent. Mentally and physically spent, or beaten to a pulp at any rate. I was a mess, or should I say a bloody mess, such a mess that the idea of an ordinary life didn't even seem real to me anymore. Only the deck separates us from hell. I believe fishermen on the high seas use that expression, but it seems like pretty much the same thing on land. Only the ground separates us from hell. I become painfully aware how unreliable the ground we walk upon is, how fragile the earth's crust, how easily it can give way. I'd become aware of it along with the pain. I had come to know how precariously balanced it all is, the road I blithely take to school, the road I blithely take home, how blithely it might all collapse. Come to know? I don't know anything. I don't mean to sound like Tsubasa Hanakawa, the girl with the mismatched wings, but I really only know what I know, and what I know is that I'm a fool. Hitagi Senjogahara, my classmate, who some kids called the cloistered princess, well, she knew how fragile everyday life could be long before I learned that lesson. You could say she'd had no choice but to learn it from her life, her lifestyle. Even lending half an ear to the more restrained rumors I'd heard about the fraying tightrope of her life thus far was enough to scare me half out of my wits.
To begin with, it's a mistake to imagine that there's a wall between the ordinary and the extraordinary. You have to distinguish between the two, of course. You can't go on living if you don't. But they're contiguous here, and they're connected. It's not a question of above or below. You don't fall from the ordinary into the extraordinary, and you don't crawl up out of the extraordinary to the ordinary. It's more like you're walking along and suddenly you're somewhere else, somewhere you don't recognize.
Like straying from the path? You're walking along the sidewalk when suddenly you realize that you've stepped out into the street without knowing it. Her analogy made sense, more or less. It's certainly true that if there were no guardrails or crosswalks, there'd be no distinction between the sidewalk and the street.
Right, and before you know it, you've been in an accident, though, between the car and the pedestrian. Who's to say which is ordinary and which is extraordinary? And there are things like your bicycle, Araragi, that blithely move between the street and the sidewalk.
Strictly speaking, it contravenes the traffic laws to ride your bicycle on the sidewalk, but then again, from the car's perspective, it's a pain in the ass to have people riding in the street. Modern problems, right?
Yep. In other words, you can still get into an accident, even if the ground you're walking on doesn't collapse, even if you keep to the straight and narrow, and not because you've lost your footing and fallen from the ordinary into the extraordinary. But you know, Araragi, sometimes you fall from ordinary into ordinary, and sometimes you crawl up out of the extraordinary and find that wherever you are now is extraordinary, too. Ah, that must be it. I've been feeling kind of nauseous, but now it makes sense it's because I've been walking with you, Araragi.
Wah! You trying to breach my defenses with some inner monologue about an epiphany you supposedly just had? May 9th. Tuesday evening. I was on the way back from that ruined cram school with Hitagi Senjogahara. Like a proper gentleman, my intention was to escort the young lady to her door, but her attitude was intensely harsh and dreadfully prickly.
What's that? You can't go around listening to other people's inner monologues, Araragi. Were you raised in a barn or something?
I didn't go anywhere. Your shit-talking came to me.
Fair, and I meant it as a compliment.
Don't start acting like some cynical character. I can give you the benefit of the doubt till the cows come home, but there's no way being with you makes me feel nauseous. Could be a compliment.
I wonder, do you think it might be morning sickness?
So, being with me makes you feel pregnant? No, that still didn't sound like a compliment.
It was just a token of my desire to tout your manliness to the wider world.
That's one hell of a negative campaign. That's only promoting my cons.
But, you know, Araragi, your own inner monologue's been making a real racket this whole time.
Huh? That's odd. I could have sworn I was talking with you. Felt like I was taking a wound about once every 5 seconds. What the hell was I chatting with? A girl or a sword? Well, nevertheless, a thoroughly gentlemanly interpretation would be that this attitude of Hitagi Senjogahara's, of this classmate of mine, was understandable. I really did have to plumb the uttermost depths of gentlemanliness, but I managed to understand it. She'd been in constant misery, after all, so miserable that she couldn't even experience misery. Misery so constant that she wasn't even numb anymore. She'd become an addict. The misery of illness. She'd been constantly struggling with illness. And thanks to her accidental brush with me the previous day, a period had been put at the end of that sentence of struggle. Though saying it was thanks to her brush with me sounds kind of self-aggrandizing. Even if she'd never met me, I'm sure she would have rescued herself from her own plight eventually, but that's neither here nor there. With Ashino's help, we'd more or less taken care of her aberration-based malady. That had been just last night. And today we'd gone to see him again to tie up the loose ends, or to deal with the final cleanup, or to take care of the last few minor issues that had cropped up. And now we were headed home. For Senjogahara, it was all so new, it made sense that she couldn't just turn off this prickly personality, cultivated to combat her illness, like flipping a light switch. As her friend, I simply prayed that at some point, her thorns would be blunted.
But you know, they say that you really learn to feel grateful for good health when you recover from an illness. But after having been sick for so long, even walking along like this feels totally novel to me.
I bet.
I feel like I'm in a completely different world.
A different world, huh? The part about walking feeling novel sounded like an exaggeration, but maybe that was her genuine impression after having been mired in fakeness. Incidentally, I'd ridden my bike to the ruined cram school the night before, but that day I walked there and back with her. Circumstances or inconveniences stemming from the previous night's resolution had ruled out my bike. Happily, those inconveniences had been taken care of once and for all, so starting the next morning I'd be riding my beloved mountain bike around town again. The thought of which made me want to skip all the way home. But I couldn't even imagine the lengths to which Senjogahara, walking along beside me, would go to mock me if I did, so I settled for walking.
Either way, Araragi, since by some miracle you're walking with a girl, how about you walk between her in the street? You really are a tactless piece of shit, aren't you?
I didn't even have to skip for her to mock me. She was right though, I was being thoughtless, so I went around to stand on her left. And I told myself, what's this? She's trying to raise me to be a proper gentleman, so it didn't even hurt my feelings.
Do you mind not standing on my left? I see what you're up to, you're after my heart.
She'd set me up. It was a little too predictable. As her friend, I'd wanted to pray for her thorns to be blunted, but never mind the prayer, the friend part was starting to come into question. You seem plenty lively. Maybe you don't need me to walk you all the way home. See you around.
What you talking about? If you're going to walk me home, walk me all the way home. What if word got out that a boy only walked Hitagi Senjogahara to partway home? My reputation as the cloistered princess would be ruined.
Self-involved much?
If you bail on me here, I'll spread the rumor that you tried to kill me.
I see you're not too worried about other people's reputations. Plus, who the hell would believe it? I'm not exactly renowned as an assassin. You don't have anyone to spread rumors to anyway.
Don't worry. I'll just mutter endlessly to myself about it in our classroom and all around school.
Hard not to worry about a girl like that. I'll walk you home already, I shrugged. I'd intended to do it out of the goodness of my heart, but it somehow ended up feeling more like an obligation. That was fine. Though it's not like I had anything else to do. I didn't care to be silenced for saying the wrong thing like the day before. I'd already given her back the arsenal of office supplies I'd confiscated.
Now then, what about it, I wonder?
What about what?
Give me a second. I'll think of a way to put this that even Araragi will be able to understand.
How about thinking of a way to put it that won't piss Araragi off instead?
Look, Mr. Oshino demanded a fee for this, right?
Oh. Yup. 100,000 yen. It might not be a huge sum in comparison to the 5 million that I owed him, but it was still a lot for a high school girl. The thing that somehow felt worst about it was that 100,000 yen seemed calculated to be just within reach, even considering Senjogahara's family circumstances. It made you think I'll work it out somehow. Do you have any savings or anything?
None at all. In fact, I'm in the red.
Huh? Your parents would be one thing but you yourself? Not counting Ashino?
Uh-huh. My team finished last year's pennant race with a 4-game deficit.
Do you own a professional baseball team or something? She was a multimillionaire in that case. Just pay off the 100,000 right now. Put it on your credit card. But even if she didn't have other debts, I believe the part about not having any savings in which case Senjogahara was going to have to find a way to save up 100 thou.
I guess I'll just have to get a part-time job at a fast food joint like Mr. Oshino said.
Well, he didn't say anything to either of us about a deadline, so I don't think you need to be too worried about coming up with a plan to get the money.
Unlike you, Araragi, I try to be scrupulous about money.
Don't just assume that I'm careless with it.
If I'm going to default on my loans, I'll default on them properly, and if I'm going to pay them off, I'll pay them off properly.
Is there a proper protocol for defaulting on your loans? In any case, I had a hard time picturing Senjogahara working part-time at a fast food joint.
Hi, welcome. You're taking this to go?
Offer them the option to stay. Don't be so eager to send them on their way.
Would you like fries with that?
Why say it like a native English speaker?
Would you like some potato with that?
Now it sounds like I'm going to get a raw potato, so for deal forth.
Sounds like I'm not cut out after all for a part-time jibe.
If it's jibes we're talking about, you're cut out for overtime. And then something occurred to me. Something I talked about with Hanekawa the previous month. About how Oshino's line of work was collecting tales of aberrations and selling them off for a pretty penny. Senjogahara, do you know any scary stories or anything?
Sure, if you count walking with you like this.
That doesn't count.
Then no, I don't.
What a harpy. I've heard of abusing the kindness of others, but being abused before you've even gotten the chance to be kind? A rare bird indeed. Listen, I was just thinking. As an expert, Oshino's doing his part to collect tales of aberrations, so if you know any unusual ones, any rare urban legends or anything, you might be able to take care of your debt that way.
Like a barter, you mean? That's not a bad idea, Araragi, especially given that it came from you. I shall grant you my praise.
A simple thank you would have sufficed. Of all possible expressions of thanks, I shall grant you my praise has to be the least gratifying to receive.
Unfortunately, though, I don't know any above and beyond the one I personally experienced.
I don't think there's any above or beyond when it comes to aberrations.
Ooh, thy words come from on high. Not for nothing has he associated with the king of aberrations. His esteemed lordship Araragi's pronouncement is precious, so very precious.
Esteemed lordship.
Indeed, from the lofty perch, whence his lordship condescends to view the world, all aberrations, all mysterious phenomena, must appear equal, but for a lowly worm like myself, crawling through the mire, the difference is quite pronounced. O Araragi the Great.
Oh? The Great? She was usually domineering, but this submissive act really worked for her.
Greek mythology tells of Ajax the Great and Ajax the Lesser, but what a title to append to a person's name. I would never call anyone the lesser.
Sure, calling someone the Great is all well and good, but lesser is just cruel.
Isn't it, Araragi, the tiniest?
My name's one thing, but if you're talking about my height, I must protest in the strongest possible terms.
What? Should I call you the Grand Araragi then? Oh, Grand Araragi.
Obsequiousness suited her. This could be a problem.
Anyway, I don't know any tales of aberrations. I'm fundamentally no good with scary stories, even worse than I am with mindless labor, so I guess I just need to find a part-time job.
I mean, sure. Do what you feel. To me, scary stories seemed like nothing but her forte, or to be honest, I felt like my first encounter with her yesterday had been one hell of a scary story itself. The madness of the stapler lady. Might Noshino pay for that one? To the tune of, say around 5 million yen?
You're thinking something rude, aren't you, Araragi?
So pointlessly perceptive. I'm not even allowed to gripe in my own head? She was a little too worried about unfavorable reviews.
Let me make this clear, Aravi. No internal freedom is allowed within 500 feet of me.
Despotism.
Your unfreedom of expression, unfreedom of faith, and unfreedom of thought are guaranteed.
Tyranny. With a surprisingly wide jurisdiction. Quite an individual.
Some call me the Red Queen.
What is this? Through the looking glass?
Or they call me a red herring.
Sounds fishy.
Some also call me a red flag. A flaming red fake.
What kind of an alias is that? It sounds cool, but it just means you're a pariah.
Huh? Right. Why am I such a pariah? Will my life play out okay?
Suddenly ill at ease, Senjogahara halted and began to worry for real. So emotionally unstable, I'd been relatively serious about parting ways partway home, but it didn't seem like I could leave a girl like her alone on a public road. I figured it was my duty as a friend to see her all the way home. I mean, even if we weren't friends, it was my civic duty.
This is bad. Araragi. I've got to start getting on people's good side. I'd hate being second only to you on the world's shit list.
Hey, do you want to be my friend, or not?
Of course I do. I want to be your frenemy.
Isn't that a combination of friend and enemy?
Yup. In other words, we'll be both friend and foe.
Wait, isn't a friend who's also your enemy just an enemy? She was trying to make it sound like a healthy rivalry. I so lacked any reason to compete with her.
Either way, I can't stand people who go around saying, oh, gee, I don't have any friends, but have friends they can say it to.
So narrow-minded, a little too intolerant.
Makes me want to teach them what it really means not to have any friends.
TTT's fine, ease up, now you've got me. Senjogahara looked at me. And what a look it was. Like her eyes might swallow me whole, I wondered, considering what I knew of her personality, if she also hated people who claimed to be her friend like me. Maybe this wasn't going to go the way it did with Hanekawa.
Faye, I suppose you're right.
She said after what seemed like forever, without producing either stapler or box cutter. I was more relieved than I could ever remember being.
Tell ease up this time, out of the goodness of my harp seal.
Harp seal?
T thought, turning a sentence ending into an animal might be cute.
IT can't get a read on your personality? A puzzling point. Past the point of puzzling. Then again, was this just her way of hiding her embarrassment? In which case, maybe there was some cuteness in there somewhere.
A scary story, huh? I wish I did know one.
Even though she'd adopted the part-time job plan, she acted as if she wasn't done considering mine. Though maybe that was still just her hiding her embarrassment.
Of course we could always make one up.
Nope. Not cute, after all. How could she calmly discuss passing off some bullshit to our savior?
Yeah, you're right. If I tried to cash in on a lie, I'd be no different from that low-life jerk.
Huh? That low-life jerk? Who do you mean?
Oh, sorry. Anytime I say low-life jerk, I mean you.
Even in this context?
Hey. Make howl. Bestand word.
With that interjection, Senjogahara, who had come to a halt, suddenly started moving, not forwards, but sideways. In other words, she made to hop from the sidewalk into the street. I couldn't begin to figure out why she tried to all of a sudden. Still, even though we hadn't known each other for very long, I was already somewhat accustomed to her erratic behavior after a couple of days together, and I reflexively blocked her movement. By putting my arm around her shoulders, I was blocking the momentum of another person's entire body, even if that person was a girl. So as you might expect, I felt a real heft unlike the day before, when I'd caught Senjogahara on the stairs.
What?
Huh?
Getting a little familiar, aren't you?
Oh, my bad, I said, removing my arm from her shoulder. But you tried to jump out into the street.
What, you thought I was committing suicide? Impulsively?
Timpulsively, or... Though I wasn't going to say so out loud, I didn't put it past her. Her battle with illness may have ended, but I doubted her struggles were over, even apart from still having to go to the hospital for a thorough battery of follow-up tests.
Don't worry, Araragi. Unlike you, with your regimen of offing yourself 3 times daily, at meal times, I'd never kill myself.
T don't have a prescription for suicide, okay?
Wow. Then how come all the girls in our class call you Johnny Suicide?
What? The girls in our class all call me that? Way to make you feel suicidal. I'm pretty sure she was lying this time, but it bothered me nonetheless. I'd have to check with Hanakawa later on, though she'd be taken aback if I asked her flat out. What do all the girls call me? Fine, Johnny Suicide wants to know why you tried to jump out into the street.
T wasn't jumping out into the street. I just wanted a better view of that.
That? I looked in the direction Senjogahara was pointing, at the sidewalk on the other side of the street and a telephone pole that stood there. Well, strictly speaking, not the telephone pole itself, but something at its base. At a bouquet of flowers. A brand new bouquet. There wasn't a stand or anything, but that had to be...
T couldn't tell from my angle, since it was behind the telephone pole and I wanted to get a better view. Guess there must have been a car accident somewhere around here.
Seems like it. Recently, you think? The road that ran from the cram school ruins to Senjogahara's house wasn't the one I usually took, it being outside my territory, so even if there'd been a car accident or really any kind of accident, I just wouldn't know. Anyway, if you got hit by a car because you were distracted by the flowers, the person who died would never be able to rest in peace. You've got to be more careful. Sadly, you sometimes heard about follow-on victims distracted by frequent accidents in this vicinity, billboard. They end up in a head-on collision, that kind of thing.
T made sure there were no cars coming, no need to worry, low-life jerk.
When that's how you keep referring to a friend, how could I not worry? Plus, I call bullshit. She'd been totally distracted by the flowers, taken together with her slip and fall on the stairs the day before. Maybe she actually was pretty careless. High-strung and careless, what a terrible combination. She finally recovered from her illness but could still wind up dead if I didn't attend to her. What was she? An endangered species? Perhaps seeing her all the way home didn't cut it. Better make sure she got safely inside. This new friend of mine was a real handful.
T just remembered.
Huh? I cocked my head at Senjogahara's sudden statement. You remembered what? My dignity? The proper way to apologize to me?
T can't remember something that never existed.
T's that right.
T remembered a scary story, so Araragi.
Yeah?
This is a command from your highness. Do what you got to do.
What kind of princess talks like that? Obeying Princess Senjogahara's command. Early the following day, May 10th, I visited the rooftop of a school building at Naoetsu High, alone. Given how things had unfolded, originally the plan was for her to accompany me, but unfortunately she was obliged to begin a period of regular hospital visits that very day. So I, as her friend, ended up acting on her behalf, or I guess, was just getting used, but I really didn't have any reason to refuse. It's not like I had anything else to do.
Appreciate it. If things go well, I'll show you my tits again.
Keep 'em to yourself. And again, my ass. Somewhere amid this back and forth I readily agreed, and found myself visiting the roof as Senjogahara had asked. The roof? Of which building?
Whichever. They were all like that.
That's what Senjogahara told me. So first I tried the roof of the building where my class was, though that makes it sound like I reached my destination by some legitimate means. At Naoetsu High, however, the roofs are basically off-limits. The doors are kept locked, denying access to your average student, let alone your below-average one like me. So, how did I infiltrate the rooftop? How did I manage my illicit trespass? I went out the window of the top floor and crawled up the outside of the building, that's how. One slip meant instant death. I, myself, was hard-pressed to understand why I was braving such dangers on behalf of a girl I'd only gotten to know the day before yesterday, but maybe I was just starved for something like a favor to do for a friend. I'd already abandoned my belief that making friends would lower my intensity as a human, but confronted with this state of affairs, I had to admit I might not have been so far off the mark. Let me note, for Senjogahara's honor, that I'm sure she wasn't expecting me to go to such great lengths. Which is to say, she'd suggested ask your good friend Hanekawa. If she cooked up some reason to ask a teacher for the key to the roof, they'd happily give it to her. Sure, most of the teachers would oblige, no matter how over the top the request was, if it came from a model student like Hanekawa, but I hesitated to bring it up to her. After Golden Week, I felt kind of awkward about asking her for anything. Sure, it was a dangerous thing to do, and climbing up the outside of the school wasn't exactly my idea of a good time, but compared to the nightmare of Golden Week and the hell of spring break, it didn't strike me as all that risky. So, it's true, just as she said. Once I'd clambered over the fence and had my feet planted on the tiles of the rooftop, I discovered that she hadn't been lying, I think she had been. Well, yeah, I kinda thought she had been. I mean, I'm sorry, but every other word out of that girl's mouth is a lie. I can't just blindly swallow everything she says. Gotta keep your mouth shut and your eyes open, watch her like a hawk. There, I got too preoccupied with having to watch her and put off explaining. I also didn't mention it earlier because I thought she might be lying, that what was just as she said about the roof of the school building was a bouquet of flowers. A bouquet of flowers. Someone had left a bunch of flowers wrapped in plastic by the fence left, or offered, maybe. Anyway, there was a fresh bouquet on the rooftop, which was supposed to be off limits. Apparently, when Senjogahara saw those newish flowers by the telephone pole the day before, she remembered this rooftop bouquet, which meant, conversely, that it had been such a trifling matter to her that she'd forgotten about it completely. A trifling matter, easily forgotten, and incidentally recalled. And yet, trifling though it may have been, it also struck her as mysterious, I suppose. Hang on, how come you were up on the roof in the first place? The previous night. Still thoroughly doubting her claim, I was questioning her so she'd back it up a little. How did you get onto the roof? It's off limits.
I may not be Big Sis Hanekawa, but I'm a model student too. I've got enough juice to wrangle the roof key out of a teacher with the right pretext.
Maybe, but don't call her Big Sis Hanekawa.
My. So you're the only one who gets to call her that?
T've never called her that. Senjogahara suspects, for no good reason, that I have an unrequited crush on Hanekawa. I have no idea on what basis. Alright, for now, we'll drop it. When and why did you go up to the roof? You spoke of a pretext, so it sounds like you weren't being entirely truthful with the teacher.
Whoa, lame. Mr. Detective, showing off his powers of deduction.
I guess I wasn't allowed to read too much into Senjogahara's words. She just lay into every single word I said. If I keep going at this rate, this flashback is never going to end, so abridging those bits and getting to the meat of her story.
When I matriculated at Naoetsu High, I had to consider my personal safety, okay? So I personally took considerable steps to safeguard it.
Leaving aside the half-assed wordplay, Senjogahara was so wary of other people that she'd even given a false address for the class directory. Hanekawa had researched Naoetsu High before taking the entrance exam and after getting in. For reasons of her own, Senjogahara carried out an exhaustive study of where was safe and where was not, who was friend and who was foe. We're not just talking about right after she enrolled. She undertook continual follow-up surveys for 2 years. She must have been aware of the little shrine in the quad that I'd recently destroyed, but deemed it safe and not paid it too much mind, and she'd given the rooftop flowers a pass as well.
TT's no tale of an aberration, or a ghost story, but if you really think about it, isn't it mysterious?
Yup, it was mysterious, because according to Hanekawa, in the 18 years of Naoetsu High's existence, there hadn't been a single incident like the death of a student, which meant this. An offering of flowers, laying as if someone had jumped off the roof, was mysterious. This wasn't like passers-by leaving offerings of cheap sweets at some flimsy shrine. It felt formal. I climbed up the ladder of the water tower on the roof, and from there I was able to confirm that the roofs of all the other school buildings were also just as Senjogahara said. A single bouquet of flowers lay on each and every roof. It was hard to say for sure at that distance, but as far as I could tell, the flowers seemed to be the same kind. Hanekawa. She'd wanted to repay Oshino with some school ghost story. But despite her research, this had escaped her notice probably because she only investigated the legal areas of the school. unlike Senjogahara. So Hanekawa didn't know everything. After all, though in this case what was funny or scary was that Senjogahara did know.
No one's ever committed suicide by jumping off a building at our school, but bouquets of flowers continue to be laid on all the roofs, quietly, anonymously, unbeknownst to anyone might this story interest. Mr. Ashino?
Said Senjogahara, as expressionlessly as ever. In the same level tone she speculated.
Should be worth around, say, 120,000 yen.
She was angling for a 20,000 yen kickback. Man, she was weird. She was warped due to her illness or aberration, or so I had assumed, and of course she was, but it seemed like she'd been weird even before any warping. Senjogahara said she was called the cloistered princess thanks to an act she put on, but if she hadn't put on that act, I wonder what people would have called her. Whatever. I'd confirmed her story. My next move should be to report the whole thing to Ashino. That sounds a little indifferent, like I wasn't particularly interested in this case, but in fact I was curious how Ashino might interpret it. Floral memorials to non-existent suicides. Bouquet. Was there some clear objective, some design, behind them, or? More importantly, I muttered, from atop the water tower. How do I get back into the building?
Going up is easy, but coming back down is hard, just like life. So, Araragi, how did you actually get back down?
Whether collecting tales of aberrations was his hobby or his job, Oshino seemed to love hearing tales of my blunders, and he listened to this one with glee. I'd hurried over to the ruins of the abandoned cram school as soon as classes ended that day, not expecting my own foolishness to be the first thing on the agenda. A little blonde girl watched me sullenly from the corner. She didn't seem to think much of my stories, whether they were about aberrations or blunders. I suppose no story involving me was pleasant for her to hear. Well, like anyone would, hanging in there like anyone would. I climbed over the fence and used my arms and legs to crawl down the wall and back in through the top floor window I'd left open.
Haha, sounds like you definitely hung in there, Araragi. Feeling nostalgic for your vampiric power? With that you could have just jumped off the roof, easy breezy.
Sure, but nostalgic? Not a chance. Even the power of a pseudo-vampire is way too much for me.
Speaking of the power of a Sodo,
Ashino said, indicating the girl in the corner.
come by sometime this weekend and give Lai Shinobu some blood, okay? If you don't, the kid'll croak.
Got it. Right. He'd given the little blonde girl a name, Shinobu Oshino. Honestly, I still wasn't used to it, but I couldn't call her by her true name, so I just needed to adapt whether I liked it or not. Give Shinobu some blood, I recited. Be that as it may, I'd been coming to these ruins a little too often since Golden Week. Why was I wasting the precious one and only springtime of my high school years, hanging out with some tacky old geezer in an abandoned building? He'd been staying here long enough to transition from a tacky old geezer into more of a grubby one. That said, I don't actually think of my high school years as a precious one and only springtime. Sure, it only happens once, and it is the springtime of my life, but precious, one gust of wind and it's gone, one moment of uncertainty and poof. That's how light it seems to me. The springtime of my life? After spring comes summer? That's all? So what do you think, Oshino? Is that story worth 100,000 yen? Hey. He was falling into a silent, pondering routine, leaving me no choice but to press him for an answer. Mean, it doesn't have to be the full amount. If 100,000 is too much, how about 80,000? Or 50,000? Or
20,000.
Damn, this ain't working, I thought as I haggled. Ashino wasn't the kind of guy who gave much away in his face, but my intuition was telling me that, how do I put this, he wasn't biting. He'd shown at least some interest in Hanekawa's story about the shrine and might even have paid her for it if she'd asked, but this time around things seemed different.
Do you have that Missy's phone number or email address, Araragi?
No, I haven't asked for them. I answered his abrupt question honestly.
Should have the other day. So you have no way of contacting her then?
I meant to ask her sooner rather than later. No need to make me look stupid. I'm just not used to stuff like exchanging phone numbers. Why do I need to contact her?
T wanted you to deliver this message. I regret to inform you that I cannot comply with your wishes, so please find another avenue for paying my fee for so.
Well, I had prepared myself for that, so it's not like I was surprised, and that wasn't worth contacting her about. Senjogahara was already planning to get a part-time job to pay off the whole 100,000. This was only ever the backup plan. I promised to let her know within the day if her long shot was worth anything. In other words, if she didn't hear from me, she wouldn't think anything of it and just start checking the help wanted listings for a part-time gig. But, and I hadn't realized this until Ashino pointed it out, on the off chance that he was willing to pay for Senjo Gahara's story, not having her phone number meant having to go all the way to her apartment, which was crazy. How mobile was I? Unlike your typical high schooler these days. Not that I'm claiming to be a typical high schooler by any means.
Well, the next time you see her at school, could you tell her formally?
Sure, but she'll be visiting the hospital for day treatment for a while, so I don't think she'll be at school. And when I do end up reporting back to her, she'll murder me if I don't give her a reason. Can't you tell me why this story isn't worth even a single yen?
T never said that. It's just that since I don't keep a ledger, I have to round off the small change or my accounting gets messed up.
Small change? What did he consider small change? Personally, I wouldn't call even a 500 yen coin change, but even if you did, getting rounded off felt harsher than simply being dismissed as worthless. Totally inconsiderate, exactly the sort of thing the jerk would say. I was really glad Senjo Gahara wasn't there to hear it. It might have turned into a battle to rival Spring Break and Golden Week. Got to avoid that at all costs. Personnels.
Haha, you're spirited today, Araragi. Something good happened to you?
No, I don't know. I just want to be ready for anything, I guess. My response to Ashino's catchphrase couldn't but be sluggish as I mulled over what the future might hold. While he callously laughed off tales of my blunders, I guess he wasn't so inhuman as to laugh off my anxieties because he said, yeah, makes sense. Ordinarily I would charge a consultation fee for this, but it's not like we're perfect strangers, you and me, so just this once I tell you something for nothing. Thanks, you're a real lifesaver. I was trying to help him with his work, even if I had ulterior motives. So I wanted to object that I shouldn't be paying him in any case, but if it was going to be for free, we were all set.
However, I'm not saving you. People just go and get saved on their own,
Was how Ashino responded.
First off, as for the site of that traffic accident you two happened upon, there was a fatality there last month. A pedestrian who was crossing the street got hit by a K-truck.
Wow, okay, you're really well informed.
TT's close by is all, and Araragi, it's to collect tales of aberrations, with or without your help, that I've been poking around here and there. Of course I'm informed.
I'll say. That, with or without your help, felt pretty alienating, but I guess it was true, and Ashino made a point of talking in a style that pushed people away. Even though I'd figured as much, the fact that someone had been killed in an accident was grievously tragic, but since I had no idea who they were or where they'd lived, there was a limit to how much I could grieve for their tragedy. My thoughts could never measure up to those of the bereaved family that I assume placed the bouquet of flowers there, but I offered up a silent prayer for the deceased.
Well, I'm not a traffic accident investigator, so I didn't look into it all that carefully. But that spot's layout seems almost designed to cause accidents. Maybe that...
Ashino continued his exposition.
Though apparently the pedestrian's own recklessness was at fault this time.
I had to wonder if he ever showed any respect for the dead, but if we're addressing the humanity of it, maybe I just came off as a hypocrite.
Even if that isn't the case, and even if we're not talking about fatalities, there've been a whole mess of single vehicle accidents and minor collisions supposedly.
Senjo Gahara nearly leapt out into the street right there herself. She told me she'd made sure it was safe, but most people said so in that situation, and probably even after getting in an accident. Oh, but I guess in her case, she was distracted by the bouquet of flowers, and it wasn't the layout.
Aha, that can happen too. I'm concerned in that regard, but we don't want to ignore the feelings of the bereaved family. Next time I go out, I'll just change the placement of the bouquet.
Yeah, please do. In fact, I should have done that myself the day before, in which case what was I thinking? Telling someone please do, like that. Nothing at all, I have to admit. Ashino was insensitive towards me, but he could be so attentive to these concerns. All that aside, let's get back to the matter at hand, Ashino.
There's no matter to get back to. We haven't gotten off topic at all. Now then, the issue is that even though no one's committed suicide by jumping off of one of the school buildings or accidentally fallen to their death, someone has nevertheless left a bouquet of flowers on the roof of every building at your school.
Yeah. That's about the size of it. That Johnny Suicide nickname Senjo Gahara tried to foist on me must have colored my thinking on the matter, because it had never occurred to me that someone could have fallen off the roof accidentally. I could have fallen during my climb that morning, for instance.
Well, whether or not anyone actually falls off of it, A roof is an accident waiting to happen, isn't it, Araragi? That's why it was off limits.
Sure. At schools where it isn't, there's usually a ridiculously high fence. At Naoetsu though, it's low enough that I could climb over it from the outside.
Indeed. Streets and schools are both prone to accidents and incidents. To put it plainly, I guess they're like the opposite of power spots.
You mean spiritually poor places? Let's see. I've heard about that stuff, like how the Northeast is called the Demon's Gate. I hustled once again to trot out half-remembered lore, but Ashino shut me down with a simple, nope, that's different. He had no interest in cultivating my mind, did he? What if I was filled with astounding potential? For what? I'm not sure.
There are, of course, spiritually poor places. I'm doing a little research on that subject even as we speak.
Well,
No, forget it. It's still too early to talk to you about that. I shouldn't have said anything. Now, let's get back to the matter at hand. We're losing precious time because you keep derailing the conversation.
come on, what's the rush? I sort of felt like he was giving me the runaround, but fine. I wasn't interested in knowing the particulars of Ashino's work, though he definitely seemed to be settling in for a long stay in a town that he'd originally only come to because of a vampire.
We're losing precious time square.
If you've got time to make terrible jokes, I think you can make time for my little digressions.
That street isn't so bad, but as a drifter, I found accident-prone setups all over the country. This footbridge blocks line of sight. That construction will make it impossible to see someone coming the other way. And then there are spots that are obvious choices for suicides, what they call suicide hotspots. But that has everything to do with the terrain or the surroundings, and spiritual factors are irrelevant.
Huh, I guess I agree. Not what I'd expect an expert on aberrations to say, though.
Well, I'm trying to counteract people's tendency to chalk up anything negative to aberrations. Haha.
Laughed Ashino. Sounded commendable enough, but since taking on the negative aspects of society was part of their function, that threatened to turn into a chicken or egg argument. It's not like I think this particular case has anything to do with aberrations, Oshino. It's not a scary story, or even a creepy story, like the one about that little shrine. Senjo Gahara herself had forgotten about it until yesterday, so it's no more than a slightly niggling, mysterious story, I guess.
Are you saying it's slightly mysterious?
Do you mean I wasn't trying to bring up Fujio Fujiko here? But something like that? Yeah. On the level of what the fuck? The old WTF. And like you said, the accident on that road probably wasn't the work of any aberration or was Senjo Gahara's attempt to leap out into it. That was just a question of the placement of the bouquet of flowers.
Indeed.
Ashino concurred.
The terrain or surroundings was the issue there too, most likely, which is why I'm going to go change the position of that bouquet soon. Because Araragi, if an offering of flowers can invite accidents, don't you think the reverse might also be true?
The epilogue. Or maybe the punchline of this story. Though this time around the punchline didn't actually come until much later, the reason being that satisfied by what Ashino said, the sense of mysteriousness cleanly swept away. I never ended up reporting back to Senjo Gahara about it. And Senjo Gahara, never hearing back from me, left it alone. I'd figured I could give her the full report next time I saw her. But the next time I saw her, namely Sunday, May 14th, things got pretty hairy in this business, just kind of, if I may, got lost in the shuffle. Senjo Gahara must have forgotten about it again, and so did I. It wasn't until the end of May that I remembered. T just remembered, I said, finally telling her about it. Basically, they were part of the school's roof supervision policy, those bouquets.
Roof supervision?
She reacted as if she'd only remembered because I brought it up, but being the brainy lady she was, it all seemed to come back to her in an instant. Yeah, just like managing the keys and putting up the fence, though compared to that, the bouquets seem more like they're for peace of mind, like a protective talisman or good luck charm.
How does putting bouquets on the roof supervise anything? If it's supposed to be like a rooftop garden, it's in bad taste. Almost as bad as your fashion sense.
There's no call to bring my fashion sense into this.
What's with that uniform?
Whatever you may say about my cities, how can you talk smack about my school uniform? Are you trying to make an enemy of every single boy who goes to Naoetsu High?
What do I have to fear from them as long as you're on my side, Araragi?
I'm on their side, damn it. Though it is in really poor taste, isn't it?
Thank you.
I'm not talking about my uniform, I'm talking about the bouquets. It's a tasteless tactic, and I don't know who came up with it, but the bouquets, which basically say someone died here, were in fact taking the place of a warning that this place is dangerous.
Taking the place of a warning, like frequent accidents sown ahead.
Yeah. Apparently there are signs at suicide hotspots to try and dissuade people, though I've heard the same signs can also make them suicide hotspots in the first place. Anyway, someone must have decided that danger signs are so ubiquitous that they've become ineffectual. It sends a pretty intense message, saying someone died here. Although, distracted by a bouquet, Senjo Gahara had jumped out into the street. Ashino called it the reverse, and the normal reaction to seeing one was to think there was an accident here. Maybe this place is dangerous, and to be extra cautious. The school put the bouquets there to arouse caution.
Kind of like how people hang up the corpse of a crow to drive off other crows. They see the corpse and are wary of getting too close. But does it really serve any purpose beyond being a good luck charm? It'd be different if, say, instead of a bouquet of flowers, they left some person who died in an accident.
Where do you come up with such horrifying ideas? Are you a demon? Ashino said. It was for peace of mind, or just a little playful inventiveness. Keeping the doors locked and putting up a fence is really plenty to keep people from falling, though it's not a perfect offense. Since there are still students like you who lie their way up to the roof.
Hold it, Araragi. I don't appreciate being called a liar. I've got a silver tongue, that's all.
Don't you mean an acid one? That silver's gotta be pretty corroded by now. Listen, the point is, in the face of imperfect supervision, the school opted for a sort of protective charm to give them peace of mind. It's not like anyone's been leaving floral tributes for imaginary deaths. Makes sense, said Senjo Gahara, seeming convinced. I mean, once you hear that explanation, it seems obvious. It's just common sense, no room for doubt, not at all mysterious, let alone aberrant. The story held an unseemly interest, but to say the least, it wasn't the type Oshino was interested in collecting. No wonder he thought it wasn't worth more than pocket change. Maybe Hanakawa knew about it, even the truth behind it, which is exactly why she hadn't brought it to him.
But that just creates another mystery, Arari. How could Mr. Oshino be so sure? Had he encountered a similar situation? How could he have come to such a firm conclusion based only on what you told him?
T wouldn't call it a conclusion. Exactly. But look, you and I made the same mistake. Whether it's an accident or suicide, if someone falls to their death, the roof isn't where you'd leave a bouquet of flowers. You'd leave it on the ground, where the person landed. With a car accident, you obviously can't leave an offering of flowers smack dab in the middle of the road where the person actually died, but if someone died falling off a roof, you'd ordinarily leave the flowers on the ground. Of course, since that's where they died, not up on the roof.
ITC, we were thinking about it all wrong, though anyone would have made the same mistake.
Really covered for yourself quickly there.
TT's meant to deter people from falling, even if it's no more than a good luck charm, so whoever put it there had to choose the roof despite the logical inconsistency, although...
I guess they won't be doing that anymore, said Senjo Gahara, looking up at one of the roofs, which were currently being renovated. A towering new fence was being erected around the perimeter. Yes, the roof improvement project was what made me remember the whole incident in the first place, and I finally made my report to Senjo Gahara. Almost 20 days late, but that didn't mean I felt relieved, or that a weight was lifted from my shoulders. In fact, I'd felt much more at ease when I'd let the whole thing slip my mind, the reason being that the project had been deemed necessary thanks to rumors about a student climbing up the outside of the building and onto the roof. The school probably never imagined anyone would be stupid enough to try and get onto the roof from the outside, and a bouquet of flowers wouldn't be terribly effective against such a trespasser. The cost of erecting new fences, a hell of a lot more than 100,000 yen, and if it came out that I was the trespasser in question, they'd do a hell of a lot more than just expel me. Senjo Gahara, who had put me up to it, naturally wouldn't be spared, either.
Araragi.
No, I know, this is our secret.
No, secret isn't good enough.
Then, what do we do?
What we've been doing.
What we've been doing.
We forget.
Though I've got to do something about the 100,000 yen I owe Mr. Oshino, before I forget, said Hitaji Senjo Gahara, in her usual level tone, devoid of any discernible emotion. I first became aware of Mayoi Hachikuchi. We first became aware of each other, in a park with an unreadable name, but thereafter, our encounters always took place out on the road. She'd gotten lost on the way to visit her mother, which was also how she ended up in that park, so I thought she might have her own take on the subject of roads, and at some point I asked her about it. How? how do you view the roads you walk down? Which is the same as asking, how do you view your own life? Just to be clear, I didn't necessarily think I was in much of a position to be asking such a question, and I was well aware as I asked it, that whatever thoughts and feelings lay behind the way she chose to live her life were inconsequential to me. If calling them inconsequential sounds inconsiderate, all I really mean is that it's Hachikuji's business how she lives her life, and if that sounds like I'm giving you the business, then let me rephrase. I just think she's free to do as she pleases. Even a friend, even a selfless, peerless friend like Hanekawa, has no right to meddle in how a person lives, though maybe in how a person dies.
Roads are just some place to walk, as far as I'm concerned.
That's just the literal meaning of a road. I don't mean that, or I mean that too, but I was thinking about roads in a more conceptual sense.
No, Mr. Araragi. It's still the same. Roads are for walking.
Hachikuji didn't budge in the face of my amended question. She just continued on with an amiable grin, as always.
A road, whatever road it might be, is a space that connects one place to another, wherever it begins, wherever it ends, that never changes. You wouldn't normally call a dead end a road, would you?
In other words, continued Hachikuji.
You can think, what kind of road is this anyway? Or where does this road lead to? Or this road is unstable. It seems like it might collapse at any moment. I'd like to be on a different road, but there is one thing you mustn't do. The moment you break that taboo, the road ceases to be a road.
I asked Hachikuji, seasoned veteran of wandering lost, what this taboo act might be, and here's what she told me. To stop walking. Once you come to a stop, that place ceases to be a road.
Oh, hello, Mr. Enough.
Come on, Hachikuji. Don't make it sound you're so fed up with our conversations that you've got tedium coming out your ears. My name is Araragi.
Bye, bud. A slip of the tongue.
No, it wasn't. You did it on purpose.
A tip of the slang.
You telling me it wasn't on purpose? Sometime in mid-June. Right in the middle of the month. I caught sight of Hachikuji while I was walking down the street as usual, and I addressed her just like always. And as usual, she mangled my name. In a nasty way. Enough already? We haven't chatted enough for that? There's a chat deficit here. Let me chat with you some more.
Please don't try to place the blame on me for mangling it. I was chatting away normally, but someone with an easily mangled name chanced to appear.
Why are you separating your chatting from the fact of my appearance? They're inextricably linked. You didn't start chatting until after I showed up with my easily mangled name.
And yet consider this, Mr. Araragi. I frequently maul your name, but you've never once mangled mine. The situation here is that only your name is getting mauled. You're the one at fault here.
Don't try to logic it into being my fault. There are a few steps missing from your reasoning. You're the one who mauls my name, so it's your fault.
Well, you could certainly say that I'm also involved.
Haha, very funny. You're the only one involved. My mind flashed to how I might mangle Hachikuji's name. Hachikuji, 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 damn it. Pretty easy to say.
So, Mr. Araragi,
Switching gears. Hachikuji asked me,
where are you headed today?
as you can see, I'm off to school. I told you the other day, didn't I? I've class changed from a worthless washout to a responsible high school student, so I'm going to school.
Irresponsible students go to school too, though, don't they?
Listen, Hachikuji, don't underestimate my previous irresponsibility. Where do you think I was going these past 2 years while I was pretending to go to school?
Where are you going?
Shopping, at the mall.
Pretty weak irresponsibility.
And since I didn't have any money, I was only window shopping.
Are you an adult girl?
Well, leaving aside how weird the turn of phrase adult girl is, I must admit that in retrospect my behavior was puzzling. I ran the risk of getting caught by a truant officer because I wanted to look at the shop window so badly. My experiences from that period didn't teach me a damn thing. They weren't beneficial to my life in any way. But I don't think that was the point. I think I just didn't want to go to school back then, and being at home was rough too. So I was probably happy to be literally anywhere else. That alone must have made me feel like I'd been rescued. From what? I have no idea. But like I'd been rescued.
Two! My! What an airy way of escaping from reality. Surface-to-air evasion, I'd call it. You've always known you were hopeless, Mr. Araragi, but I never imagined you were so hopeless.
Hey, that's kind of harsh.
Would you like me to call you Mr. So Hopeless from now on?
Don't do me any favors. You're mangling my name so badly they'll have to identify it from dental records?
Not exactly a name to leave for posterity, though, is it?
Team not interested in going down in history, but even if I were, I sure as hell wouldn't want it to be as Mr. Soapless. Well, surface-to-air evasion just made it confusing, but an airy way of escaping from reality. She hit the nail on the head there. How can I put this? If I'd gone on like that, things might have gotten pretty bad by now. A lot worse. Than simply straying from the path, in which case meeting Hanakawa over spring break, meeting Shinobu, meeting Senjogahara might have been a huge turning point in my life.
You may be right. Walking down the road also means meeting people.
Whoa. Did you just say something positive, Hachikuji?
Yes, I did. It's true. Meeting those people might have been the halfway point in your life.
No, a turning point. Not a halfway point. I'm too young to be over the hill.
Well, they say geniuses and fools die young.
You're clearly lumping me in with the fools. Halfway point, my ass? I'm 18, which means I die when I'm 36.
Oh, that was unexpected. Who knew you could do arithmetic?
Just how incompetent do you think I am? Don't you know, math is my forte? It's the sole basis for my class change from washout to college, hopeful. The only guiding light.
But, Mr. Araragi, mathematical aptitude or lack thereof aside, isn't it kind of amazing that everyone can do multiplication and division? Everybody ends up more or less getting a hang of it. But it's actually pretty advanced stuff.
Now that you mention it, yeah, for sure. I don't know who decided it or when, but whoever decided that kids would learn their times tables in second grade is kinda impressive. In which case, maybe it isn't such a bad idea to teach kids in our country English when they're little. Well, before I can tackle my college entrance exams, I've got to graduate from high school first. I may have told you this before, but that's why I'm still showing up for school. Impressive, huh? As impressive as whoever decided to teach kids multiplication in second grade.
But everybody goes to school.
By virtue of which, Hachikuji, I don't have time to talk with you. I'd been pushing my bicycle along as I walked in step with Hachikuji, but now I re-straddled it, my school commuter granny bike. Then again, my non-commuter mountain bike got smashed to bits in an unforeseen accident the previous month, so the prefix school commuter was no longer really necessary. When you think about it, it's kind of odd to call it a granny bike when the rider isn't a granny, and why shouldn't grandma these days ride, say, a monster bike? Fare thee well. Be not downhearted. When you wish to see me again, I shall appear before you once more like a knight in shining armor.
So this is goodbye forever.
What do you mean? Wish for it already? To see me again?
To once for it, maybe.
Hachikuji said disgustedly, making no attempt to hide how put off she was that I'd put on airs. Being loathed by a child can deal massive damage, and when I tried to start riding away, I missed the pedal completely. Having blown my chance at a smooth exit, I thought, gotta turn this into some kind of opportunity. Was there something I wanted to tell Hachikuji? Aha, got it. I hadn't told her about that yet. Hey, Hachikuji.
What is it, Mr. Remainder of One?
Remainder of one? What the hell is that? Did you get my name wrong again? Or did you just divide 3 by 2?
Oh, don't worry. This time it wasn't a slip of the tongue. It's your new nickname, since you're the one who's most likely to be left over anytime people are picking teams.
Most likely to be left over? Why does everyone and their mother want to give me these horrible nicknames? There's something I have to tell you. I forged ahead.
What is it?
Ashino, Mimoshino, that middle-aged expert, your benefactor, he left town. It was just the other day. He took off as suddenly as he'd shown up, and probably in some other town now. He was collecting tales of aberrations as he'd done here, while also looking after this or that hopeless guy, the kind who exist everywhere. In other words, someone like me.
Hachizi, that was pretty abrupt, huh?
Well, yeah, it was definitely abrupt. He was a rootless vagabond to begin with, so from his perspective, maybe he stayed here for a long time. Oh, right, you never actually met him face to face. Maybe you don't care that much. But it's not like you guys weren't connected. I figured I ought to tell you.
Please, I do care. You can't even hold a candle to how much gratitude I feel towards that man.
Being grateful is all very well, but do it without snubbing me along the way. I'm immensely grateful to him too.
No matter how much gratitude we express for Mr. Machino, it would never be enough.
Machino? If you're so grateful to him, don't make him sound like a phone booth where you can make wishes.
If we're talking Mashimo boxes, he's more like Doraemon's little sister Dorami's. All decked out.
Decked out? Sheesh.
Ha! So in any case, Mr. Ashino's gone.
Hachikuji must have said Machino on purpose, not that it isn't on purpose when she mangles my name, because now she spoke his name normally and nodded.
That spells trouble though, doesn't it, Mr. Araragi? How will you ever subsist without him?
It's not like I'll be sleeping on the street just because Ashino left. He hadn't been providing for me or anything. Sure, I may have leaned a little too hard on him regarding aberration-related matters from now I was on my own. We had to walk our own road standing on our own feet.
Well, we might not end up homeless, but we'll miss him. Oh, but Mr. Araragi, if he's gone, what about that issue?
That issue? Which issue?
Always playing innocent. Always getting up on your high horse. Always keeping me on the edge of my seat. You're one of teas.
T can't even guess what kind of character you're trying to be. She rarely followed up with anything good when she was like this, and was preparing me for it. What was it this time?
Oh, should I just leave it alone? Did I perhaps bring up a taboo subject? Am I touching on the dirty secrets of the Araragi industry?
The Araragi industry? What sort of insular field is that? I don't form such a thing. Come on, Hachikuji, out with it. This is unlike you.
I'm not gonna let anyone from the Araragi industry tell me what I'm like.
Whether or not I should be defining what you're like is a fair question, but I'm not someone from the Araragi industry. Okay? I'm Araragi, period.
Ah, this is what I'm talking about. This.
Hachikuchi made a loop with her thumb and forefinger. Good. Okay! If that wasn't what she meant, she was making the sign for money. Well, I was pretty sure that's what her sudden gesture meant, but I still couldn't figure out what she was getting at. I didn't have any money, in either sense, coming to her. Or did I need to cough up some dough to get her to talk with me? Did this grade school girl operate like a hostess bar? I needed to think twice about initiating a conversation with her.
Oh, a flat reaction.
No, I really don't see what you're getting at.
Ah, maybe I should put it this way then.
Hachikuchi dropped her candid hand gesture and, assuming the proper posture, spoke with proper etiquette.
Congratulations on skipping out on your 5 million yen bill.
T didn't skip out on it. Ah, got it, there we go. I had told Hachikuji before about how I owed Ashino 5 million yen, told her about it, or consulted her about it. Maybe it's not the best idea to consult elementary school kids about your debts, but I wanted my relationship with Hachikuji to be one where I could talk to her about anything. And yet, I hadn't shared how things had turned out. In other words, I hadn't found the chance to tell her that taking over an aberration handling job from Ashino, or having the whole thing dumped in my lap, happily resulted in the cancellation of my debt. I had to admit, having consulted her about it, I was amiss not to have informed her of the outcome. But, believe it or not, Hachikuji's take was that Ashino had left town without getting his money from me. Quite the idiosyncratic interpretation. And how far-fetched. Did she really think I was the kind of guy who'd skip out on a debt? Listen good, Hachikuchi. I'm a guy who pays his debts.
Well, that's a good attitude, but it's pretty standard.
What a normal reaction, after all that.
To mean, don't borrow money you can't repay, right?
Wrong, Hachikuji. Debt essentially makes the world go round. Individuals and corporations are all smothered in debt. Credit cards, loans, collateral, all of them involve borrowing money from someone and then working your ass off to pay it back. How much debt do you think Japan carries?
When you put it that way, sure. But then the world is a sad place, isn't it?
It's not sad, because a debt is basically just a promise. There's the trust that in the future, sometime in the future, you'll pay it back from the money you earn. In other words, it's the future and promises and trust that make the world go round.
You make it sound so good.
In between the future and promises and trust are dire straits, filled to the brim with human misery, but that's a secret. It had been my lot until the other day. If you include that, I guess it's the future and promises and trust and secrets that make the world go round. By the by, Senjo Bahara also took care of the fee she owed Ashino. Unlike me, she ultimately paid it off with cash, not work or out-of-the-pocket money she received for helping her father out with his work in lieu of a regular part-time gig. I just kind of let it pass at the time. But exactly what sort of help do you perform to earn 100,000 yen in such a short time? Anyway, I took care of the money I owed Ashino. I'm squeaky clean, totally debt-free.
A filthy mind and a squeaky clean body, huh?
Nope, not filthy. My mind is not filthy. I believe in Santa Claus and everything.
You do? No.
Yeah, he still brings me presents every year.
You still get presents from Santa Claus even though you're in high school.
How do you like that? A squeaky clean mind and a squeaky clean body. The only other debt I have left is the 3,000 yen I borrowed from my little sister.
3,000 yen? Pay it back already, please.
It's my personal policy not to return something that doesn't need returning, even if it's just an email.
No wonder you don't have any friends.
I thought you were a guy who pays his debts, Hachikuji lamented with an exaggerated sigh. Now that she mentioned it, I did vaguely recall having said something of the sort, but my conversations with Hachikuji are mostly about the vibe, so please understand that something said on one page is forgotten by the bottom of the next.
See. Either way, glad to hear the money's being paid back. I'm a little disappointed.
Huh? Why? You're disappointed about me paying Ashino back. Do you want me to be the kind of character who's always up to his ears in debt? Are you after my land or something?
And exactly where is this land, Mr. Araragi? No, look, you said it yourself at some point.
At some point? When?
When you were being stalked by your Speedy Jr. When you came to consult me about owing Mr. Ashino so much money and what to do about it. While we were talking, you said something about how if you didn't have the scratch, you might be able to give him a rare aberration tail or something in place of money, didn't you?
Oh, I said all that? Well, I must have. Back then, I was flustered because that Speedy Jr. was stalking me. And to be honest, my memory of the period is pretty unclear. But I do remember consulting Hachikuji about my debt, so it wouldn't be surprising if I'd said all that. Though I very much doubt I used the word scratch.
In other words, it would be like two CCG players exchanging rare cards.
Well, that childish analogy may be all very well for an elementary school student, but it's somewhat divorced from reality. If we had to put it in terms of CCGs, it'd be like trading a rare card for cash, so her analogy wasn't particularly appropriate. Nor was it something that kids should be doing at home.
So ever since then, Mr. Araragi, your humble servant has been keeping an eye out during her travels for any story that might fit the bill and be of help to you. Tales of aberrations, or ghost stories, or what have you.
Really? You've been doing that for me? I was moved. Moved by the friendship of Mayoi Hachikuji. Who would have thought this girl in the prime of her cheekiness worried about my debts and tried to help me pay them back? I had misjudged her. I'd assumed she was just one more person who couldn't stand me. This fifth grader was a wonder. Such an industrious spouse.
That's a strange way to put it, Mr. Araragi.
Such an industrial space.
He wasn't planning on getting involved in factory production for your sake, Mr. Araragi. But in any event, I've been conducting this secret activity on your behalf. Now that it's come to nothing, though, I'm kind of disappointed.
Yeah, stands to reason.
My disappointment is on par with the 3 great disappointing landmarks of Japan.
TT can't be that bad. And what the hell are you even talking about?
Famous landmarks that aren't as disappointing as you thought they would be, which is itself a disappointment.
Ah well, said Hachikuji.
He went to all this trouble to find a story, but now my plan to sell it to you for an astronomical sum is ruined.
Plan? Astronomical sum? You weren't just gonna give it to me? It wasn't a present for Mr. Araragi.
Not a chance,
she said, sounding vexed.
What present for Mr. Araragi? Stick to getting your presents from Santa Claus. Thank you very much. If I were to give you something, it'd be a presentation on how to be a stand-up guy.
A harsh one, I bet. Wait, this was vaguely terrifying when I thought about it. So basically, she'd been trying to sell me an aberration tale. If she'd been roaming the town since then on that mission, the girl's obsession with money was not to be taken lightly. On a mission? More like on commission? No, maybe it wasn't about the money. Had this girl just been looking forward to driving me even deeper into debt? What a close call. Good thing I got a handy job from Oshino before that could happen.
Ouch, seriously, I'm in a pickle here. I laid out a ton of money on spec for this. What am I gonna do with this aberration tale I hunted down so I could flip it to you, Mr. Araragi?
Don't ask me. Here we were feeling the effects of Ashino's disappearance. If he were still in town, we could probably have gotten at least a little something for the aberration tale Hachikuji had found, even though I'd already paid him back what I owed. But with Ashino's aberration mart closed for business, there was no one in town who'd be interested in doing business around urban legends, and the word on the street. Market speculation isn't a game for greenhorns, a cautionary tale.
Mr. Araragi, I want that for 5 million. Just buy it, please. Great jewelhead! Dive a hard bar dozen. Do you really want to make me feel like I've done all that work for nothing? For another obedient child to disappear from this world, replaced by a jaded kid.
T don't care if you're jaded or not. The second you tried to sell your friend a ghost story, you were already plenty jaded. Although, her faux nefarious or flagrantly nefarious speech aside, it wasn't an out-and-out lie that Hachikuji had gone to some trouble on my behalf. So, maybe I shouldn't let her feel like it was all a waste of time. It'd be detrimental to her upbringing, sure, but if she internalized the lesson that any more work I do on Mr. Aragi's behalf will also be pointless, my prospects might also be somewhat dimmed. This kid might come in handy for me somewhere down the line, so going easy on her right now might actually be a good move.
Uh-oh. Are you concocting some devious scheme, Mr. Araragi?
Excuse me, I'm just continuing to be moved by your friendship.
You're certainly being moved for a long time. Got stuck on the move setting, huh? Are you emotionally unbalanced, Mr. Araragi?
By the by, how much were you hoping to get for it, Ebenezer Hachikuji?
50 yen would be plenty.
That's a steal. I was sure she'd try to haggle for more. Maybe I was getting the friend discount?
Oh, though, the story was never worth more than that in the first place.
You were trying to pass off a 50-yen story on your friend for 5 million. That's not a friend, not even close. That's a sucker. Give me a break, Hachikuji. We don't want people thinking that conning me is as easy as taking candy from a baby.
Baby shouldn't have any in the first place. They might choke.
Isn't that sweet? The candy, I mean, not you. I felt around in my pocket and took out a 50-yen coin that happened to be there. If it had been a 100-yen coin, I would have said keep the change, but tough luck, Mayoi Hachikuji. So, what's the story? Let's hear it.
Right. It's a story about sand.
Sand?
Right. Well, sand or... Oh, but before I get to that, may I ask you something?
What?
It's about Mr. Ashino taking off. Now that he's left the cram school, what's become of this vampire I keep hearing rumors about? This newfound lost child, Miss Shinobu Ashino? I doubt Mr. Ashino took her along with him.
Ah, well, she's... I looked down at my shadow as I spoke. My deep, dark, pitch-black shadow. Sorry, if I stay to hear your story. I'm already barely going to slip in under the bell as it is. I'll tell you next time. I dodged. Hachikuji had said sand, but more specifically it was a sandbox, the sandbox in a certain small park. It wasn't the same one where I'd first encountered Hachikuji. True, apart from parks where I'd played as a child, they all pretty much seemed the same to me. But unlike the one where I'd met Hachikuji, the one with the name I couldn't read, the smallish grounds of this park were packed with a wide variety of playground equipment, including a seesaw, a jungle gym, and monkey bars. And of course, a sandbox. It was at the bottom of the slide, though the slide was just a slide, and the sandbox was, in that sense, nothing but an ordinary sandbox, nothing strange or clever about its construction. That only went for the design of this sandbox. However, there was definitely, as Hachikuji had said, something abnormal about the sand. An abnormal phenomenon, a bizarre phenomenon. That may sound like an exaggeration, but if you'd suddenly been shown this in the middle of the night, if you'd witnessed it, I guarantee you'd be shaken up.
Yeah, I was all shook up. What do I mean shook down?
Someone robbed you?
He shook it off.
You should have been shaking in your boots. Sandwiched though it had been between our playful banter, Hachikuji's explanation had been, largely, clear and comprehensible. She has yet to contract Senjo Behara's disease of feeling the need to attack me with literally every other word, though she's bound to catch it before long. Once they've taken hold, diseases like that are almost impossible to fully cure, so prevention is the key. The first bell had already rung by the time she'd finished telling her story, but I'd managed to slip into the classroom before the final bell. After that, I lived the life of the diligent student for 6 hours or so, and after that, on the way home from studying for finals at Senjogahara's house, I headed to the park that Hachikuji had told me about. It was nighttime. The dead of night, you might say. Hachikuji didn't actually know the name of the park, and I didn't see anything like a sign when I entered still. As soon as I saw the sandbox in question, there was no longer any doubt in my mind that she'd meant this park. Like they say, seeing is believing. It was obvious at a glance that this was the sandbox. Seeing is believing, but I can't be leaving just yet. Despite the darkness, I had my vampiric sight or its after effects, and they were serving me well now. It was as if I'd been fitted with a high-res night vision scope. As far as I could tell from looking through it, some kind of picture had been drawn on the surface, had been drawn, or had emerged. I don't know, this might sound ironic, coming from someone who was only seeing it thanks to the after effects of being a vampire, but it looked downright demonic. A monstrous portrait, as if the sand itself were an aberration. What was it that Ashino said? The simulacrum phenomenon. How people can end up seeing human faces in anything. Sure, I got that. But what about when it's a demon's face instead of a human's? Well, okay. Spirit photography, provided it's not done with CG, is mostly some incidental combination of light and shadow, or haze or dirt, which just ends up looking that way. Hachikuji had been walking around looking for a bizarre and mysterious phenomenon to sell me, and under those circumstances you might very well see something mysterious in the topography of a perfectly normal sandbox. Perhaps having heard her story, I had a preconceived notion of what I'd find, and ended up getting the same impression. The stone statue back in April, the bouquets back in May, they'd been more or less like that, so it made sense to suspect this too was such a case, but only if Hachikuji and I had at least seen the sandbox on the same day. This wasn't a stone statue or a bouquet of flowers. Each individual grain of sand may have solid form, but sand as a whole is a shifting mass. Was it really possible for us to see the same demonic face on different days? Not to mention sweet nothings written by lovers on the beach. Basically, all it takes is a gust of wind for sand to change its shape. That's why sandboxes are great places for kids to play. Surely, in the almost half a month between when Hachikuji saw this demon drawn on the surface and today when I came to check it out, a parade of kids had played in this sandbox. Making mountains, tunneling through those mountains, digging holes, or perhaps calling on all the skill at their command to construct a castle. Could a sandbox, having undergone all that, really display an identical aspect to me as it had to her? It meant that whatever changes had been wrought upon it, however much it had been moved around and turned over, the sand contained in this sandbox shifted back into a demon. A remonstrating monster, as if the sand had a will of its own. Was there any kind of sand aberration? The sand-throwing hag? Though in that case the hag is the monster, not the sand. He wasn't a monster, but I did recall a relevant Superman from the Kinnikuman manga called Sunshine. Even so, I very much doubted this sand was about to take on human form and suddenly attack me, and yet I'd almost died twice at the hands of aberrations recently. The mere thought set off alarm bells? Well, having confirmed that the info Hachikuji sold me for 50 yen wasn't bogus, what now? Not that I came here just out of curiosity. If there really was a threat, I couldn't just leave it alone if for no other reason than that it was in a public park. It was the kind of thing that doesn't bother you if you don't know about it, but now that I did, I could spare at least a little time to look into it. Ridding myself of a bizarre worry simply by stopping by on my walk home from Senjogahara's for a few minutes would be a dream come true. Maybe not a dream come true. Man, my vocabulary is pretty weak. Anyway, unlike my disagreeable little sisters, I'm not the kind of person who goes around intentionally looking for trouble, but when trouble sideswipes me, I can't just let it be. Such a dicey or enigmatic sandbox which, worst case scenario, might curse the children who play in it, was no laughing matter if I were going to look into it. Better do it right away. Though a high schooler playing in a sandbox in a deserted public park at a time that could be called the dead of night might seem even dodgier than an aberration. That said, it's probably just someone's idea of a prank. Someone, like for instance, a high schooler playing in a sandbox in a deserted park in the dead of night. When I actually put it into words, this supposed prankster struck me as a pretty far-fetched character. But if you left out the high schooler part, it didn't seem like an impossible explanation. In fact, it seemed pretty plausible. Drawing a face on the surface of the sandbox to scare away kids who were trying to play there. Or no, maybe it wasn't a prank. Maybe it was the work of their so-called guardians. Some parents don't want their children playing in places like sandboxes where their clothes and hands will get dirty. Maybe they made this drawing to keep their kids away from the sandbox, to scare them, to frighten them off, and even if they weren't so high-strung, there was always the possibility that it was just a question of supervising the park at night. Like how Naoetsuhai put bouquets on the roofs to keep people away. Nope. I promised Senjogahara I'd forget about that whole thing. I shouldn't be remembering it here. That aside, chances were this was a man-made phenomenon, not to parrot Ashino's oft-stated frustration with everyone blaming aberrations every time something goes wrong. But when something does happen, it makes the most sense to accept whatever explanation seems to be, on the whole, most likely. When something goes down, blaming humans rather than aberrations will yield a much higher success rate, though coming from someone who's still saddled with the after effects of having been a vampire, that sounds somehow supercilious, or weirdly pompous, or just unconvincing. After all, ever since Hachikuji had told me, I'd harbored my fair share of doubts about this sand, even before getting here. Now then. With that, I got into the sandbox. For a moment, I debated taking off my shoes, but I'm pretty sure there's no rule about having to go barefoot in the sandbox. My investigation had a serious goal, but my inner child couldn't help being stimulated. Since the beginning of middle school, or even the last year of elementary school, boxes of sand have essentially only been for doing the long jump, not for playing. This return to childhood made me want to try sliding down the slide into the sandbox, but that was taking the merrymaking too far. I could think of excuses for investigating a sandbox, but it'd be a catastrophe if anyone saw me swooshing down into it. Why were you doing that? They'd ask. It was an aberration. An aberration made me do it, I'd answer. And in that case, it wouldn't be the police station they would haul me off to. I squatted in the center and gingerly scooped up some sand. The demonic face had gotten messed up the moment I set foot in the sandbox, but now I helped it along further. I called it investigating, but I was destroying the object of study. Then again, I couldn't hope to match Ashino's armchair omniscience. Carrying out any kind of non-destructive examination was off the table. In detective novels, they always say that preserving the scene exactly as it was is fundamental to investigations, but a layman can't be expected to do it without disturbing things. Seems like normal sand. True, I'm no expert when it comes to sand. Ordinary sand from a sandbox in a public park. In fact, thanks to me, playing in the sand under the guise of an investigation, the demonic face or whatever had disappeared without a trace, and was failing, of course, to revert to its original form in an instant, or anything like that. As a test, I formed a small mound. I thought maybe if I played in the sandbox like a child, there'd be some sort of reaction, but there wasn't. A shabby little mound of sand took shape, that's all. After a minute or so lost in thought, I knocked it over and smoothed it back the way it had been. Then, brushing the sand off my hands, I stepped out of the sandbox, and once outside I noticed that even though I hadn't played or investigated all that vigorously, my shoes were filled with sand. Not just sand, anything made up of tiny grains will get in everywhere, no matter what you do. Taking off my shoes, I shook them one at a time, dumping the sand back into the sand. Thanks to my vigorous trampling, it looked like an ordinary sandbox, but once I saw it in that state, I realized just how difficult it was to recreate that demon. Even making a little mound was harder than I thought. Never mind transforming the whole sandbox into a face, demonic or otherwise. You needed to be able to grasp the whole sandbox as a canvas, or, to put it simply, it required some modicum of painterly ability. Though, I guess it was three-dimensional, so a sculptorly ability. At any rate, it was an impossible task for a guy like me, who couldn't even construct a decent shed. Perhaps one of the parents, or pranksters, who lived nearby, had a flair for the fine arts. Actually, was it done as an art project in the first place? Maybe it wasn't just here, maybe the sandboxes in all the parks, up to and including unpronounceable park, were inscribed with similar pieces of art. The sandbox would be an odd medium to choose, but that very transience might make it art. I didn't get that way of thinking, but I did get that it existed. About as well as I got writing sweet nothings amid the breakers at the seashore, at least. Although it was night, I cast a shadow in the moonlight. I looked at that shadow, just a shadow, and muttered, well, if I can play in this sandbox without incident, vampiric after effects and all, then it seems like there's no urgent issue here. I couldn't help sounding like I was looking for reassurance. I knew perfectly well there'd be no reaction, but I just had to. Even knowing there'd be no response, I'd continue addressing my shadow anyway. Honestly, it doesn't speak highly of whoever's doing it, whether it's a prank, or art, or a parent over parenting. But I don't think I need to intervene, or interfere. It's not like I can get involved at the drop of a hat every time there's an aberration, so the work of a human being. With that, I put the park in my rearview mirror. Calling it a mistake might be a little too hard on myself, but if there was a mistake I made here, it was assuming that if something wasn't the work of an aberration, it had to be a man-made phenomenon, and conversely, that if something wasn't a man-made phenomenon, it had to be the work of an aberration. If this assumption had reached Ashino's ears, I'm sure he would have laughed it off, as always. Though, who knows, maybe he would have scolded me. Ashino may or may not have scolded me, but Hanakawa did, unambiguously. Tut! I hadn't been scolded in that way since kindergarten. It happened right after I got home from the park. I got a phone call from Hanakawa. Currently, not one but two model students, Senjobihara and Hanakawa, were helping me with my studies, which made me extremely lucky. Since Senjogahara had been on duty that day and our work had been successfully concluded, I had no idea why Hanakawa was calling me, but ignoring a call from my great benefactor was hardly an option, so I answered it. Hello?
Hey, Araragi, sorry for calling so late. It's just something's been on my mind. Is now an okay time?
Sure, now's fine. Actually, I wanted to wash off the dirt from the sandbox, but I'm not enough of a clean freak to put off Hanakawa in favor of a shower.
T just received Senjogahara's regular report.
Regular report? What the hell? It sounded terrifying. Wait, so after our study sessions, Senjogahara reported to Hanakawa about how it went, a debriefing about whether or not I was studying properly? Gah, a serious lack of faith.
Oh no, this wasn't for the Araragi rehabilitation program. It had more to do with the Senjogahara rehabilitation program. But forget about it.
Is that really a forget about it kind of a net?